Hey, the high school dropout, still rocking that pathetic style, huh? Well, let me treat you to some fine wine today. At the reunion, I bumped into a classmate who used to mock me for being poor back in school. Despite us both being grown adults now, the moment he spotted me, he unbelievably held his wine glass over my head and poured the wine all over me. The rich aroma clung to my entire body, leaving me feeling terrible. How about that? Bet you're thrilled to get a taste of the high life, high school dropout. This guy hasn't changed one bit since those days. I was beyond angry, filled with disappointment. I've made up my mind to side it about what I declared something ruthless to the classmate who mocked me. Then his eyes widened and his face turned pale rapidly. Well then, let's start my counterattack in full. My name is Kevin. Raised in a typical family with a self-employed father and a stay-at-home mother, my childhood was free from significant hardships. After school, I tossed my backpack and play in the neighborhood park with friends until dusk. But things changed when I entered middle school. My father stopped coming home due to his work. It was normal for my dad to come home after I had gone to bed and leave early in the morning. I just assumed it was normal for him not to be around much. But on his rare days off, he did try to provide some family time, like going for drives nearby or taking us to amusement parks. And then it was just my mom and me. Mom, are you okay? One late night as I got up to use the bathroom, I saw her sighing repeatedly while looking at the household budget book. Yeah, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about anything, she said with a smile. But her face was visibly worn. Lately, there had been changes at the dinner table. The number of side dishes had decreased, and the fruits that used to be a staple were now gone. The lunches she packed for me each morning also changed, mostly just plain rice with a small amount of pickles or simmered dishes. One day, Brad caught sight of my meager lunch and started picking on me. Your dad ran off in the night, leaving your family behind, didn't he? I heard it from my dad. That's why you bring such lame lunches, right? It's hilarious, he said, laughing with his cronies. I was so angry I almost lashed out, but the image of my mom's smiling face came to mind and I clenched my fists to hold back. I don't want to cause trouble for Mom. Brad was the son of the president of Bradley Merchandising, a well-known food company in the area, and was seen by teachers as a model student due to his good behavior. In reality, however, he was a terrible guy who used his father's status and connections to bully others. If anyone stood up to him, they became his target. Fearing this, my classmates gradually distanced themselves from me, turning a blind eye to how I was treated. Encouraged by this, Brad's teasing only escalated, and finally, I reached my breaking point. It was lunchtime as usual. I sat in my usual spot, a secluded corner of the staircase, eating my lunch. Hey, who's Kevin? Brad yelled. Yo, Brad, I replied. Brad approached me with a sneering smile. I usually ignored him, but he didn't like that and took an unexpected action. Typical peasant's lunch looks as bad as ever, he said, reaching for my lunchbox. Hey, what are you doing? I impulsively knocked Brad's hand away. Ouch, you sorry, but he suddenly reached for it. Then Brad snatched my lunchbox and slammed it onto the floor. The rice and leftover meat and potatoes from last night scattered in a sad mess. I pictured my mother's sad face. What the heck are you doing? I shouted, grabbing Brad by the collar. Think you can hit me? You know what'll happen if you do, he said with a smug look, seeing his triumphant face. I lost all restraint. Before I knew it, I was on top of Brad, his handsome face red and swollen, his lips split. Both of us were breathing heavily. You'll pay for this. Brad's voice trembled. Hey, what are you two doing? A teacher from student discipline, alerted by the commotion, yelled fiercely and dragged us to the guidance office. I'm so sorry, my mother said, her face pale, bowing repeatedly. This is unacceptable, causing such a disturbance at school. The teacher with a characteristically shiny face and bulging eyes scolded us. No matter how many times I explained, the teacher wouldn't listen, instead fully believing Brad's fabricated story. Brad, as if nothing had happened, vilified me as a violent person. Being the son of a well-known local businessman, he was untouchably supported, facing no consequences. Faced with this blatant injustice, all I could do was endure. After the hellish guidance session, as my mother and I were leaving, the teacher spat out at me. I'm worried about what kind of adult you'll become, always resorting to violence. Can you even become a decent person? Just you watch. But our life became increasingly difficult, with my mom's part-time job not enough to make ends meet. Despite the violent incident with Brad, my mom believed in me to the end. Always kind, my mom was someone I didn't want to burden any further. So with a sole desire to ease her burden, I decided not to pursue college and instead chose to work. Decades have since passed, days whizzing by, seasons changing rapidly, and society evolving at a dizzying pace, brimming with new conveniences. Before I knew it, the familiar streets had transformed, and my bitter, dark adolescent years seemed to fade into the distance. It was around this time that I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. When I saw that letter, the image of Brad's sneering face came back to me. He would undoubtedly be there. Honestly, I wasn't keen on going, but we were all grown-ups now. Surely he wouldn't start anything petty. With that thought, I decided to attend. "Hey Kev, long time no see. You look good." Being called by my nickname by a classmate felt like I was back in middle school. While many had drifted apart after the violence, a few classmates who remained friends through it all were there, and he was one of them. "Man, you've aged a bit, haven't you?" he said, patting his protruding belly. "You too." As we shared updates and reminisced, a familiar voice rang out. "Hey, you're here too, huh? Wow, Brad, that's you." He seemed quite drunk and was in high spirits. "Brad, you okay?" I was surprised at myself for expressing concern. But Brad, glaring fiercely, retorted, "A bottom feeder like you worrying about me?" I hadn't fallen that low. "Listen up," holding a wine glass, he boasted. "I run Bradley Merchandising. It's wise to stay on my good side." He laughed arrogantly, then peering into my face, he exclaimed, "Hey, the high school dropout, still rocking that pathetic style, huh? Well, let me treat you to some fine wine today." And with that, Brad held his wine glass over my head and poured the wine all over me. The surrounding crowd went silent, staring at us in a scene of total chaos. The reunion was completely ruined. The rich aroma clung to my entire body, leaving me feeling terrible. How about that? Bet you're thrilled to get a taste of the high life, high school dropout. He hadn't changed a bit from the times he used his privileged position to cause trouble. I was beyond angry, filled with disappointment, all my secret hopes shattered. "Brad, have made up my mind, decided about what to do." To Brad's mocking face, I delivered a stark announcement. "You're fired." The room fell silent for a moment. "Fired? What's that supposed to mean? High school dropout? Can't even speak English?" Brad asked, clearly baffled. But I said seriously, "It means exactly what it sounds like." The crowd began to murmur. A former classmate tapped my shoulder and asked a question that seemed to float in everyone's mind. "So what do you do now?" "I currently work at a food company as renowned as Bradley Merchandising." Wiping my head and face with a handkerchief I took from my pocket, I started explaining. "I'm in charge of corporate acquisitions, and I'm actually working on acquiring your company as the next president. You should know this better than anyone." "What? What are you talking about?" Brad, trying to act tough, had his lips twitching and sweat on his forehead. "President Johnson should have officially contacted you about this, right?" "Johnson? President?" Brad's face turned completely pale. "Yes, I work for Johnson Merchandising, a company my father is the president of. After high school, I joined this company and now serve as an executive director, overseeing the entire company. Deciding not to pursue college and instead work was tough, as there were hardly any companies willing to hire someone with only a high school education. I couldn't afford to be choosy anymore. I applied for any job I could find and ended up working part-time at a logistics warehouse. However, the barrier due to my lack of education was thicker than I imagined. Once people learned about my educational background, their attitudes changed, and I was never considered for permanent employment. Would my life end just as a factory Tim, lost in despair? I was returning home from work one day. When I encountered the unexpected, I arrived home to find my father, whom I never thought I'd see again. He looked much older, with white hair mixed in. Despite his weak smile, the sight of him brought a surge of anger, thinking of all the hardships we endured. "You just waltz back now. You have no idea how much we suffered." Then my father tearfully apologized. "I'm sorry, honey Kevin. I'm truly sorry. I was so focused on getting the company on track that I neglected you. No excuse can change the fact that I caused you unnecessary hardship. I'm deeply sorry." My mother and I, without a word, just stared at him. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I want to at least apologize to you both in some way, he said. The house was completely silent. Eventually, my mother spoke up. Regardless, I'm thankful you've come back. Things might not go back to how they were, but I do want to try and rebuild our family little by little. But there's a condition. What is it? My father asked. Give this boy a full-time job at your company, my mother said, surprising me. Kevin has been working hard since he decided not to go to high school. He should be enjoying his youth like others his age, but due to his educational background, he struggled to find a full-time position. My mother's face was serious, almost frighteningly so. How much time had passed? I wondered. All right, my father said. Kevin can work at our company, but on one condition. He must take the GED. Understand? There was a sense of earnestness in my father's voice, his concern for my future evident, considering the circumstances. Having to give up high school to work, I stepped up from a factory temp to an employee at a renowned company. Of course, it wasn't easy at first. In fact, it was a continuous struggle. Being the president's son made me a target of envy, and I was often harshly criticized for even minor mistakes. Being new to corporate life, I struggled with understanding business etiquette and social norms. Sweating through every new challenge, my colleagues would just scoff, offering no help. I felt completely isolated at work. Despite this, I worked tirelessly, volunteering for menial tasks and responding earnestly to unreasonable demands from superiors. Seeing documents I worked hard on being thrown into the trash with a smirk, or finding my desk littered with trash, I often thought about quitting. It was disheartening to be judged through the lens of being the president's son. Despite all my efforts, what kept me going was my mother's presence. The mixed emotions she must have swallowed when she asked for me to be hired at my father's company must have been excruciating. For her sake, I had to meet the company's expectations. As I continued to work relentlessly, gradually, people began to recognize my efforts. Slowly, I was accepted as a team member, and this began to reflect in my work results. It possibly provided a healthy stimulus for other employees as the company's sales started to rise year by year. As a result of my hard work, I was recognized and promoted. From this year, I became an executive director entrusted with important tasks. I have been involved in negotiations for the acquisition of Bradley Merchandising, a company that had been on a downward spiral for several years. Kev, you've made an incredible rise through the ranks. Never thought we'd have an executive director among our classmates. It's going to be awkward just casually inviting you out now. My unexpected identity caused a stir among the crowd. But Brad, still in disbelief, insisted, "Stop lying. I don't accept such a tall tale." Well, it seems your dad, the president, didn't share much about the company's situation with you. It's not surprising you didn't know. But my father was going to make me president. About that, I said, my expression serious. My father instructed me to overhaul the entire management of Bradley Merchandising, from the president down. That's impossible. Brad's face froze. But I didn't have enough evidence to make such a drastic decision. Then I heard about the reunion and remembered. You were supposed to be the next president. I thought it wouldn't be too late to meet and talk here, but as I let out a breath, releasing the disappointment welling up inside, Brad, you hadn't changed at all. Still belittling and blaming others, still full of baseless confidence. That doesn't mean you can fire me. Come on, help me out. We're classmates, right? His attitude had changed drastically from his earlier arrogance, now desperately pleading. But I wasn't going to soften my stance over something like this. I just made a logical decision as a business leader. Running a company isn't as easy as you think, I said firmly, grabbing Brad's shoulders and looking him in the eye. I faced many challenges as the president's son, but I never gave up because this company was my only path. You had more advantages, attending a good high school and graduating from college. It's time you put in real effort for once in your life. Tears held back, my voice shaking as I spoke to Brad. But he just stared back in silence, not uttering a word. A month after the reunion, I stood in front of the Bradley Merchandising building with my father. Today, we'll officially proceed with the acquisition. I had confided in my father the day before, and after some reluctance, he agreed to my terms. We've been waiting for you, said the president of Bradley Merchandising, greeting us as he entered the meeting room, followed by his son, Brad. Bradley spoke of his intentions to have Brad succeed him as president. Now, about the acquisition, he prompted me to start the discussion. But Brad's behavior was appalling, far from what one would expect from a future president or even a professional. I raised my voice. Hey, Brad, are you even listening? This is about the future of the company. Do you even realize the responsibilities of a president? I don't need to hear that from you, Brad retorted. Then he turned to his father, saying something outrageous. Dad, are you sure it's okay to trust our company to someone who just climbed up using his parents' influence? Brad's suggestion that he was more capable of making beneficial decisions for the company seemed almost delusional. My father, witnessing this, clearly showed a look of exasperation. Even the usually stern face of Bradley grew more severe. Fool. What do you know about our company? He said, his temples throbbing with anger. Brad could only stare back with an expression I had never seen before. Bradley continued unabated by his anger. Kevin's right. Your attitude today is beyond disrespectful. Running a company is not a game. If you're not serious, then leave. Brad's voice was pitifully weak in response to his father's overwhelming presence. The president then stood up, facing us with a serious expression. I apologize for this disgraceful display. I've been too indulgent with my son, expecting him to become more responsible in the workforce. But I was mistaken. I never imagined he would behave so foolishly, especially in such a setting. To you, the executive director of Johnson Merchandising, and you, Kevin, I apologize for his many discordances. As a parent, I am truly sorry. My father then addressed Bradley. Your feelings are clear, Bradley. The once imposing figure of the food company's president seemed utterly diminished. Bradley, with a desperate look, continued, President Kevin, we need your help to save Bradley Merchandising. We no longer have the strength to continue on our own. If we come under your company's wing, I will step down from all my management roles, and the same goes for the entire board. But please keep our employees, our precious staff, without letting anyone go. With that, he bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched the table. I looked at my father, who seemed deep in thought, his eyes closed. Dad, I murmured quietly. He nodded solemnly. Bradley, I began, yes, I see how much you care about your company. Given that, let's give you another chance to turn things around. Brad and his father looked shocked. Yes, a chance. If you genuinely care about your employees, there's still something to be done. We'll support you as much as we can. If that fails, we have no choice but to take over completely. Kevin, how can I ever thank you? Beside his tearful father, Brad looked completely drained, as if all the strength had left his body. I continued speaking, glancing between the two. I've always resented my father, I began, causing a look of shock in Brad. He neglected our family under the guise of work, forcing me to give up high school. I aimed to prove him wrong. But my mother, who suffered the most, forgave him. I still vividly remember my mother's resolute face when she chose to forgive. At first, I couldn't understand her. But now I get why she decided to forgive. She taught me the importance of it. I heard my father murmur softly. Kevin said, I am who I am today because my mother forgave my father, and recently, I finally felt like I can forgive him too. Bradley nodded in agreement, feeling as if pushed forward by an invisible force. I continued my thoughts. Everyone deserves a second chance. People become stronger by overcoming adversity, I said, turning to Brad, who was slouched back in his chair with a sulky demeanor. Brad, it starts here. Isn't this your time to step up? But I don't know anything about running a company, Brad muttered. I placed my hand on his shoulder. It's okay to start now. Work hard, and the results will follow, Brad, I reassured him. Brad looked at me, a faint smile on his face. For the first time after countless discussions, Bradley Merchandising agreed to a business partnership with Johnson Merchandising and began the path to recovery. Brad became the new president with his father as an advisor. Shedding the pride of being the son of Bradley Merchandising, Brad worked tirelessly to regain the trust of each business partner through humble visits. His transformation inspired the employees, and their mindset began to shift. The company, once complacent under the guise of a large corporation and marred by internal power struggles, saw employees stand up to the challenge. Sales put more effort into their work, and the administration focused on creating a welcoming environment for business partners. Brad notably enhanced working conditions by revising inclusive welfare policies and eliminating exclusive systems, contributing to a significant turnaround for the formerly struggling Bradley merchandising. Encouraged by the changes in everyone, including Brad, the company's sales gradually climbed like ascending stairs. This year, we were even able to provide bonuses to all employees, albeit modest ones. Similarly, our company's performance improved significantly, and we've now reached a point where we can sponsor various advertising campaigns. The reunion became a catalyst for rekindling friendships with classmates, I reflected. Initially wary of Brad, they were now impressed by his transformation, sharing jokes and laughter. "Hey, can we drop the president title when we're off work?" I teased. "It's just a habit," Brad said, scratching his head in embarrassment. "Then at least call me by my old nickname when we're not working." I forgot what it was. "You used to call me that all the time." "Can't believe you remember that," Brad said, feigning exasperation. "All right, how about this? From now on, every time you call me president, you owe me a drink," I proposed with a smile. "That's a good idea." "Okay, Kev," Brad agreed, stopping in his tracks and calling me by the nostalgic nickname. "Thanks, Kev." Human nature tends to cling to negative emotions, and I've been no exception. I resented being looked down upon for being a high school dropout and felt bitter about my social standing. If I hadn't forgiven my father, I might not have reached out to Brad and others. Despite all the harassment from Brad, I couldn't give up on him. Remembering my own struggles, I realized that people who overcome hardships can face any challenge ahead. If you strongly desire to start over, you can change from that point. I plan to lead the company humbly, navigating the challenges of business with dedication alongside my valuable friends and colleagues.
"You're nothing without me, Ivy. Don't forget that. You're lucky I'm putting up with you." Blake spat, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. His eyes were cold, lips curling in disdain as he looked at me from across the dining table. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks. I clenched my fists under the table to keep from trembling. This wasn't the first time Blake belittled me, but tonight was different. There was nothing left of the man I had married, only this stranger who thrived on crushing my spirit. His high-paying job made him think he was king of our household, and I was just a serf. "I'm doing my best," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "My freelance work is going well. I just landed a new client today." "A new client?" Blake laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Your freelance project is a cute little hobby, Ivy. Don't forget whose salary actually pays the bills around here." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Graphic design," he sneered as if the very words were beneath him. "What would you even do without me? You'd be penniless. Remember that." I felt my frustration bubbling over. This wasn't about the bills or money. It was about respect, something Blake seemed to have forgotten. "Blake, this is important to me. It's a real job, even if you don't see it that way. I'm contributing too." Blake's expression hardened. "You're contributing nothing but headaches. I manage the finances, I make the tough decisions. You play on your computer. There's a big difference." The air felt thick with unspoken anger. He always managed our money, giving me just enough to get by. Even groceries felt like an uphill battle. But despite the control, I had been putting money aside little by little without Blake knowing. Blake stood up abruptly. "I'm done with this conversation." His tone was final, absolute, meant to put me back in my place. "Clean up the kitchen. I'm going to bed." As he walked away, I could feel the tears welling up, but I swallowed them back. Not tonight. I wouldn't let him see me break. Not again. In the quiet of the kitchen, I scrubbed the dishes with more force than necessary, trying to wash away the frustration clinging to me. Later, I sat at my small desk in the living room, my computer screen glowing softly. Blake's words echoed in my mind, but they fueled something new within me. Not fear. Not sadness. Determination. Sophie's text notification popped up on my phone. "How's it going tonight?" I hesitated, but replied truthfully. "Same old. Can we talk tomorrow?" Of course. Anytime. He was my lifeline, the one person who saw through Blake's facade and encouraged me to stand up for myself. I took a deep breath and opened my project files. Seeing the colorful, creative work in progress was like a balm to my wounded pride. This was mine. This was my future. Blake's condescending laughter still rang in my ears, but I focused on the design before me, vowing silently that I wouldn't let his words define my worth. I would prove him wrong. This fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. With renewed determination, I began working on my project, each click of the mouse a step towards reclaiming my life from Blake's shadow. The next morning, the smell of coffee greeted me as I entered the kitchen. Blake sat at the table, his head buried in the morning paper. He didn't even look up as I poured myself a cup. "Don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning," he said, his tone authoritative. "And we need to talk about your spending. You've been going over budget on groceries again." I bit back my retort. It seemed everything I did was wrong in his eyes. "Sure, I'll take care of it," I muttered, grabbing my coffee and heading for the door. Outside, the crisp air was a relief from the stifling tension inside. I made my way to Sophie's place across the street, grateful for the brief escape. She opened the door almost immediately, a concerned look on her face. "Morning, Ivy. You okay?" Sophie asked, ushering me inside. I sank into her comfy couch, finally able to breathe. "Same old," I said, shrugging. "Blake had another meltdown over money this morning." Sophie shook her head, handing me a steaming mug of tea. "You deserve better than this, Ivy. You're talented and hardworking. Have you thought about setting up a separate account? Something he can't touch?" A glimmer of hope sparked inside me. "Actually, I already have one. I've been saving what I can from my freelance earnings. It's not much, but it's something." Sophie's eyes lit up. "See? You're already making moves. Just keep building on that. You need to be ready for anything." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "Thanks, Sophie. I don't know what I'd do without you." She gripped my hand reassuringly. "You're stronger than you think, Ivy. Just keep pushing forward." Back home, I sat at my computer, diving into work. The project flowed effortlessly, my client's excitement contagious. But it wasn't long before Blake's looming presence interrupted my focus. "Ivy, come here," he barked from the living room. I hurried over, feeling my stomach knot. Blake was standing, arms crossed. "I looked through our finances. We're tight this month. You've been spending too much again." "That's not fair," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Prices have gone up. I'm doing the best I can with what you give me." His eyes flashed with anger. "You always have an excuse that maybe if you focused less on your art and more on running this household, we wouldn't have these problems." I said nothing, my jaw clenched tight. Any response would only escalate the situation. Blake sighed in exasperation. "Just be more careful, okay? I'm tired of having this conversation." I nodded, turning away before he could see the tears threatening to spill over. Back at my desk, I forced myself to focus on my work again, using the creative process as a sanctuary from his relentless criticism. Later, as I stepped out to run errands, I found myself crossing paths with Vanessa, Blake's colleague. She flashed me a polite smile, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing in my marriage. Little did she know, she was part of it. At the grocery store, I carefully budgeted with the meager amount Blake allowed. The cashier's sympathetic smile felt like a small comfort in a sea of frustration. As I loaded the bags into my car, my phone buzzed. Another client inquiry. Small victories, I thought, starting the engine and heading home. The day passed in the same tense rhythm. By nightfall, the house was silent, Blake already asleep. I stood at the window, looking out at the darkened street. Sophie's encouraging words echoed in my mind. Just keep pushing forward. Taking a deep breath, I returned to my desk, immersing myself in my work. I was building something that was mine and mine alone, steadily chipping away at the chains Blake had wrapped around my life. This was just the beginning. "Can you please make sure dinner is ready by 6?" Blake called out from the living room, his voice dripping with entitlement. I took a deep breath, pausing my work to answer him. "Sure, Blake. I'll start cooking in a bit." "Better be on time this time," he muttered, barely loud enough to hear. I gritted my teeth, pushing down the surge of irritation. Later at Sophie's place, I shared my struggle with her. "I can't keep living like this. He's relentless, Sophie." "Why don't you take on more freelance projects?" she suggested over a cup of coffee. "Save more money. Build a safety net." I nodded, the idea growing roots in my mind. I'm already taking as many as I can handle without him noticing. But you're right. I need more. "Sophie," I leaned closer. "There's something else. I think Blake's having an affair." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I found a hotel receipt in his jacket. I need more evidence." Sophie squeezed my hand. "Be careful, Ivy, but you deserve to know the truth." Back at home, I waited for Blake to leave for work the next morning. As soon as he was out the door, I rummaged through his things, finding nothing substantial. Frustrated, I decided to bide my time, watching for more clues. Days later, I found what I was looking for. Another receipt, this time from an expensive restaurant, slipped from his briefcase. My heart sank, but I kept my face neutral. That night, I didn't say a word about it. Instead, I focused on work and took on more projects, each completed job bringing me a bit closer to independence. My secret savings grew steadily, despite Blake's constant attempts to undermine my confidence. About a week later, an opportunity presented itself. Blake was called out on a late-night work emergency. Realizing my chance, I searched through his jacket pockets again, finding a forgotten note with Vanessa's name and phone number. I snapped a picture of it with my phone, my suspicions solidifying into certainty. That weekend, Blake announced he had a late meeting with a client. "Don't wait up," he said, grabbing his keys. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I watched him walk out, a mixture of anger and resolve bubbling inside me. I waited half an hour before making a call to the hotel he had visited. "Hello, I'm looking for Blake Parker's room," I said, masking my voice's tremble. "Blake Parker is staying in room 204? The receptionist confirmed cheerfully. There it was, the confirmation I dreaded and yet needed to hear. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "You okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm good, thanks," I replied, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. Blake returned late, reeking of guilt and expensive cologne. I bit back the urge to confront him, knowing I needed to be strategic. Patience would serve me better now. Instead, I continued my routine, recording his verbal abuse and keeping track of every shifty move. My carefully curated evidence grew piece by piece. One final straw would snap the fragile thread of my tolerance. At Sophie's suggestion, I began networking more aggressively, boosting my freelance profile. I dove into my work with renewed energy, each completed project a symbol of my found strength. The pieces were falling into place. Blake's arrogance blinded him to the gradual shift in our dynamic. I was no longer trapped. I was preparing to break free. And when the time came, there would be no turning back. I sat across from Sophie, a pile of design mock-ups between us. "These are looking fantastic, Ivy," she said, flipping through the pages. "You think you can take on more clients?" I nodded, determined. "Definitely. I need as many projects as I can get." "Good," Sophie said, smiling. "Let's get you connected with some of my contacts." They're always looking for quality designers. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and I worked tirelessly to enhance my portfolio and network with new clients. Every small success was a victory, boosting my confidence. My savings grew steadily as Blake remained blissfully unaware of my plans. One night, as I worked late on a project, Blake hovered behind me, watching silently. Suspicious but unsure, he finally broke his silence. "What are you doing, Ivy?" "Just finishing a freelance project," I replied calmly, keeping my eyes on the screen. Blake scoffed. "You and these little projects, make sure you're not neglecting your responsibilities around here." "I'm not," I said firmly. "This work is important to me." He sighed, shaking his head. "Just don't let it interfere with the household. You need to prioritize better." Tension cranked up a notch, but I continued undeterred, knowing I was building towards something bigger. Meanwhile, Blake's behavior grew more erratic. He constantly checked on me, his suspicion fueling a toxic atmosphere at home. One evening, after a particularly heated argument over money, I knew I had to act faster. "Sophie, I need your help," I said, my voice shaky as I explained the latest confrontation. "We'll get you through this, Ivy," she reassured, holding my hand. "Focus on gathering all the evidence you need. I'll help you however I can." The next day, I decided to install a small camera in the living room, discreetly hidden among the books on the shelf. It was my insurance, my means of capturing his aggression and painting the true picture of our life together. As Blake continued his escapades with Vanessa, leaving little clues here and there, I collected each piece methodically. The recordings piled up, his scathing remarks, his controlling behavior, his blatant disrespect. One night, I reviewed the footage alone at my desk. Blake's voice filled the room, laced with contempt. "You're worthless, Ivy. Without me, you're nothing." The words stung, but they also fortified my resolve. Days later, Blake left his laptop open as he took a call in another room. Heart pounding, I seized the opportunity, quickly accessing his email. There it was, a string of messages with Vanessa, detailing their meetings and expenses. I copied everything, making sure to leave no trace. After he left for work the following morning, I met Sophie in my kitchen. "I've got it all," I said quietly, showing her the evidence. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the emails. "This is enough, Ivy. You can confront him now. You've got everything you need." I nodded, bracing myself. "I just need to time it right, when he's least expecting it." That evening, Blake arrived home in a foul mood, grumbling about work. "Dinner ready?" he barked. "It's almost done," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. As we sat down to eat, I watched him carefully, feeling a strange mix of fear and empowerment. Soon, I would confront him, and this charade would end. I had built my case, strengthened my position, and was ready to reclaim my life. With every bite, I steeled my nerves, knowing the moment of truth was fast approaching. The game was nearly over, and this time, I would emerge victorious. Blake stormed through the front door, slamming it behind him. "Ivy, we need to talk," he shouted. I looked up from the kitchen table, where I had been working on my latest freelance project. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. "What is it, Blake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He threw his briefcase onto the couch, glaring at me. "I want you to quit your freelance work. It's taking up too much of your time. You need to be focused on this household, not your silly hobby." My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. "Blake, my work is important. It's not just a hobby. I'm contributing to our finances, and it brings me fulfillment." His face contorted with rage. "You call this contributing? What you do is insignificant compared to what I bring in. You need to understand your place, Ivy." Something inside me snapped. I reached for the folder I had prepared, my hands surprisingly steady. "Blake, sit down. We need to talk." He looked taken aback, but his arrogance only deepened. "This better be quick," he muttered, sitting down. I placed the folder in front of him. "Open it," I said. Blake's eyes scanned the documents, printed emails, hotel receipts, financial records. His face turned pale. "What is this?" he growled, trying to cover his shock. "This," I said calmly, "is proof of your infidelity and mismanagement of our finances. I've had enough, Blake. I'm done being your doormat." His shock turned to fury. "You think this little file is going to scare me, Ivy? You're delusional. Do you honestly believe you can survive without me?" "I've already started," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "I have my savings, a growing client base, and support from people who actually respect me." Blake's eyes narrowed, and he stood up abruptly, leaning over the table. "You think you can just walk away from this marriage? I'll make sure you get nothing. You hear me? Nothing." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I have enough evidence to ensure you won't be able to control everything anymore. And guess what? I want a separation." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Fine, Ivy? You want a separation? Good luck. You'll come crawling back once you realize you can't handle the real world." I stood up, matching his aggression with a calm determination. "I'm done living under your shadow, Blake. You'll see just how capable I am. Now pack your things and get out." Blake stood there, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. "You're making a huge mistake, Ivy." "No," I said firmly. "The mistake was thinking I needed you." Without another word, Blake grabbed his briefcase and stormed upstairs. I heard the sounds of drawers opening and closing, his anger palpable even through the walls. When he finally emerged, a suitcase in hand, he paused at the door. "You'll regret this, Ivy," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Goodbye, Blake," I replied, not looking back as he left. As the door clicked shut behind him, a wave of relief washed over me. It wasn't the end, but it was a new beginning. I walked to the window, taking in the quiet street outside, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. It was time to rebuild, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Blake moved out that evening. At first, he seemed confident, as if certain he could manipulate me into taking him back. But as days turned into weeks, reality began to set in. "Ivy, we need to talk," Blake said one afternoon, standing on the porch, a forced smile on his face. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What is it, Blake?" "I miss you," he said, unconvincingly. "This whole separation thing, it was a mistake. We should try to work things out." I crossed my arms, standing firm. "Work things out? After everything you've done? No, Blake. I'm moving forward with the divorce. His face darkened, the facade of charm slipping. Do you really want to ruin both our lives over this? Think about it, Ivy. You can't make it on your own. I already am, I said calmly. I've landed a major contract with a marketing firm. I'm financially independent, Blake. I don't need you. Blake's eyes flickered with anger. How can you do this to me? You think you can just erase me from your life? You brought this on yourself, I replied. Now, if there's nothing else, I'd appreciate it if you left. Blake stormed off, muttering curses under his breath. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. He was starting to realize he had lost control. A few days later, I received a call from a mutual friend, Lisa. Ivy, have you heard? Blake's affair with Vanessa. Everyone at his office knows. It's causing quite a stir. Really? I said, unable to hide my satisfaction. Interesting. It's all over the place, Lisa continued. Apparently, Blake tried to blame you for his stress at home, but no one's buying it. His reputation is in shambles. I thanked Lisa and hung up, sitting back with a sense of vindication. Blake's world was crumbling, and he had no one to blame but himself. A week later, Blake showed up again, but this time his demeanor was different. Desperate. Ivy, wait, he called out as I was heading to my car. What do you want, Blake? I said, not stopping. I am sorry, he stammered. I was wrong. Please, can we talk? I turned to face him. Talk about what? You've shown your true colors. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything. Just give me another chance. He looked pathetic, a shadow of the man who once tried to dominate my life. I shook my head slowly. It's too late for that, Blake. You need to face the consequences of your actions. As I drove away, I felt lighter. Blake's downfall was his own doing, and he was finally reaping what he had sown. The next few weeks saw Blake's life unravel further. Vanessa left him for another colleague, someone with better prospects. The scandal at his workplace grew, leading to his termination. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with a sinking ship. Meanwhile, my freelance business thrived. The major contract I had mentioned to Blake was just the beginning. New clients poured in, drawn by the quality and dedication I put into every project. My confidence soared, and my financial independence was solidified. I finalized the divorce, gaining significant compensation from Blake. He was left with a tarnished career and a bleak personal life. The irony wasn't lost on me. His arrogance had led him to this point. One evening, as I sat in my newly decorated living room, I received a text from Sophie. Celebration dinner tomorrow? You've earned it. Absolutely, I replied, smiling to myself. The future looked bright, and for the first time in years I felt truly free. Blake's chapter in my life was closed, and I was ready for whatever came next. I stood in the conference room, waiting for my meeting with the marketing firm's executives. The glass walls offered a view of the bustling city below. My heart raced with anticipation, but I felt confident. This was a far cry from the timid Ivy who once cowered under Blake's shadow. The door opened, and Mr. Thompson, the firm's director, walked in with a warm smile. Ivy, good to see you again. Come on in. Thank you for having me, Mr. Thompson, I said, shaking his hand. He led me to the table where several other executives were seated. Everyone, this is Ivy Parker, the talented graphic designer we've been hearing so much about. I took a seat, feeling a surge of pride as they nodded in acknowledgement. This campaign is crucial for us, Ivy, Mr. Thompson continued. We've seen your work, and we're confident you're the right person for the job. We spent the next hour discussing the project. They were impressed with my ideas, and by the end of the meeting, I had secured the contract. As I walked out of the building, the weight of my achievements settled in. I had built a thriving business and established myself as a respected professional. Back at my new apartment, I reviewed the contract, excitement bubbling within me. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Sophie. How did it go? She asked, her voice eager. I got it, I said, unable to keep the triumph from my voice. That's amazing, Ivy. Let's celebrate tonight. Definitely. I'll see you at 7, I replied, hanging up with a grin. I glanced around my apartment, a symbol of my newfound freedom. It was cozy, filled with personal touches, and devoid of Blake's oppressive presence. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Blake's downfall had paved the way for my rise. Later at the restaurant, Sophie and I clinked our glasses together. To new beginnings, she toasted. To new beginnings, I echoed, smiling. Thank you for always supporting me, Sophie. I couldn't have done this without you. Hey, you did all the hard work? I just gave you a little nudge, she said, grinning. Our laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tense, unhappy dinners I once had with Blake. I realized how far I had come and how much I had gained from walking away. The next morning, I received an unexpected email. It was from Vanessa. Ivy, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to apologize. I never meant to hurt you. Blake deceived me too. I've left him and moved on. I hope you find peace. I stared at the message, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I had no intention of replying, but it was a reminder of how much had changed. Blake's attempts to reach out continued to fail. His calls and messages went unanswered. He was now working a menial job after struggling to find employment in his field, his reputation too tarnished to recover. He had become the epitome of lost potential while I had thrived. I felt no pity for him. This was his karma, the consequence of his arrogance and betrayal. He had underestimated me, and now he was living with the results. As for me, my life was full of new opportunities and possibilities. I had not only survived, but flourished. The future was mine to shape, free from the shadows of my past. That evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been tough, but it had made me stronger. And with every breath, I welcomed the promise of the days to come, confident that I could take on anything life threw my way. The sun streamed through the windows of my new apartment, casting a warm glow over my fresh start. It had only been a few weeks since the divorce was finalized, and I felt a profound sense of freedom. My business continued to thrive, and the future looked brighter than ever. Ivy, how about we grab lunch today? Sophie texted early that morning. Sounds perfect. Noon at our usual spot? I replied, smiling at her perfect timing. At the cafe, Sophie and I chatted over sandwiches and iced coffee. She couldn't stop smiling. You look so much happier, Ivy. It's like a weight has been lifted. It has been, I admitted. I'm finally living the life I want, without anyone holding me back. We spent the afternoon reminiscing and planning new adventures. The ease of our friendship was a stark contrast to the tension that used to consume my days with Blake. I felt grateful for every moment of peace and happiness. Back at my apartment, I looked around with pride. Each piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, reflected my taste, my choices. It was a sanctuary of my own making. Later that evening, a knock at the door interrupted my work. I opened it to find Blake standing there, looking disheveled and defeated. What do you want, Blake? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Ivy, please, he begged. Can I come in? No, Blake. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. He hesitated, his eyes filled with a desperation I had never seen before. I lost my job, Ivy. Everything's gone downhill since you left. I don't know what to do. I felt a pang of pity, but I stood firm. That's not my problem anymore, Blake. You made your choices and now you have to live with them. Please, Ivy, he said, his voice breaking. I made mistakes, but I've learned my lesson. I need help. I shook my head, the resolve in my voice unwavering. You took everything from me, Blake. My confidence, my happiness. It's time you learned to stand on your own. His shoulders slumped as he realized the finality of my words. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Goodbye, Blake, I said, closing the door. As the lock clicked into place, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Blake was truly over. Over the next few weeks, life continued to flourish. My business grew even more successful, and I found joy in every new project and client interaction. Sophie and I celebrated each victory, big and small, her support unwavering. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself standing in front of a beautiful old building in the heart of the city. With my newfound success, I was ready to invest in an apartment of my own, a place even more representative of the new life I had built. I signed the papers with a mix of excitement and pride. That evening, Sophie and I toasted to new beginnings in my soon-to-be home. To your amazing journey, Ivy, she said, raising her glass. You've come so far, and I'm so proud of you. To us, I replied, clinking glasses. To the future and all the adventures it holds. As we sat on the balcony, overlooking the bustling streets below, I realized how much had changed since Blake had walked out of my life. His downfall had been his own doing, and I had not just survived but thrived. I was more than the sum of his betrayal. I was resilient, independent, and ready to embrace whatever life brought my way. In the quiet of the night, I felt content and hopeful. The journey had been long and challenging, but every step had led me here, to a place of peace and newfound strength. The future was mine to write, and it brimmed with endless possibilities. "I've decided that my mother will be moving in with us next week," Kevin declared, his eyes locking onto mine. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me? Without discussing it with me?" "We can't have her here," I rebutted, my voice trembling with a mix of shock and anger. Kevin leaned back, unfazed by my reaction. "It's not up for discussion, Jenna. Mom's been through a lot since Dad passed, and she needs our support." My heart raced as I processed his words. Elaine, Kevin's overbearing mother, moving in? The mere thought sent shivers down my spine. "But this is our home, Kevin. We should have talked about this first." He scoffed, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Don't be dramatic. It's just temporary until she gets back on her feet." I bit my tongue, knowing from experience that arguing further would be futile. Kevin had made up his mind, and my opinion didn't matter. Still, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this would be the beginning of a nightmare. As the days ticked by, the knot in my stomach tightened. I thought back to when Kevin and I first met, how charming and attentive he was. But over the years, that spark had faded, replaced by a growing indifference and a prioritization of his own needs over our relationship. The morning of Elaine's arrival, I braced myself. But nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that ensued. Movers poured in, hauling not just a few suitcases, but an entire household's worth of belongings. "What's all this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the commotion. Elaine swept in, her presence as domineering as ever. "Well, dear, I couldn't possibly leave my precious belongings behind. This is just temporary, after all." I shot Kevin a pleading look, but he simply shrugged, already retreating into his usual detached state. As the movers began rearranging our living room to accommodate Elaine's furniture, I knew my life as I knew it was over. That evening, I called Megan, my best friend and confidant. Tears streamed down my face as I poured out my frustrations, feeling more alone than ever in my own home. "I don't know what to do, Meg," I confessed. "It's like Kevin doesn't even see me anymore. And now, with his mother here, I feel like an outsider." Megan's soothing voice offered little comfort. "You have to stand your ground, Jen. This is your home too, and you can't let them walk all over you." But as the days turned into weeks, Elaine's presence became increasingly suffocating. She took over my kitchen, rearranged my carefully curated decor, and inserted herself into every aspect of our lives. Meanwhile, Kevin's emotional distance grew, and he started spending more and more time away from home, leaving me to fend for myself against his mother's intrusions. With each passing day, Elaine's presence grew more oppressive, her tentacles snaking into every nook and cranny of our once peaceful home. No matter how hard I tried to establish boundaries, she bulldozed right through them, treating our space as her personal kingdom. "Jenna, dear, don't you think these curtains would look better over there?" she'd say, already rearranging my carefully chosen decor without waiting for a response. Kevin, true to form, remained oblivious to my mounting frustrations. Whenever I tried to broach the subject, he'd brush me off with a dismissive, "Mom's just settling in," or "she means well." Meanwhile, his absences from home became more frequent and prolonged. Business trips, he'd claim, but I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that something more sinister was afoot. One evening, as I pored over our bank statements, a disturbing pattern emerged. Large sums of money, thousands upon thousands, had been steadily disappearing from our joint accounts. My heart raced as I cross-referenced the dates with Kevin's supposed business trips. Desperate for answers, I reached out to an old acquaintance, Greg Wilson, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion. If Kevin was up to no good, Greg would uncover the truth. "I need you to tail my husband," I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "I think he's hiding something from me." Greg agreed without hesitation, and the following weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and hushed conversations as he fed me crumbs of information. "Your husband's been frequenting some unsavory establishments," he reported one afternoon, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside were grainy photographs of Kevin entering a seedy-looking casino, his face obscured but his gait unmistakable. My world shattered in that moment, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. Kevin, the man I had once loved and trusted, was gambling away our savings, our future, all while letting his mother infiltrate and undermine our home. Confronting him was an exercise in futility. "You're overreacting, as usual," he sneered, his eyes cold and devoid of remorse. "If you can't accept the way things are, then maybe you should leave." The venom in his words stung, but I refused to back down. This was my life, my home, and I would be damned if I let him and his wretched mother take it all away from me. With trembling hands, I dialed Megan's number, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I need your help," I choked out. "Kevin, he's been lying to me, stealing from me, and his mother, she's taken over everything." Megan, bless her soul, didn't hesitate. "Pack a bag and come stay with me," she urged. "We'll figure this out together, I promise." As I stuffed my belongings into a suitcase, a newfound sense of determination washed over me. Kevin and Elaine had crossed a line, and they would pay for their betrayal. This was just the beginning. Elaine's domination of our home only intensified after I moved in with Megan. Like a malignant tumor, she metastasized into every corner, leaving no space untouched by her overbearing presence. "That woman has no boundaries," Megan fumed as I recounted the latest indignity. Elaine had redecorated our bedroom without permission, tossing out cherished mementos in favor of her gaudy knickknacks. I could only nod, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. Kevin's betrayal cut deeper than any wound, but it was his mother's insidious meddling that twisted the knife. With each passing day, Kevin grew more distant, his visits to the house growing increasingly rare. When he did show up, it was like a ghost drifting through, offering little more than a cursory greeting before disappearing into the night. "Working late," he'd mumble, his eyes downcast, unable to meet my gaze. I knew better. Greg's surveillance had painted a clear picture. Kevin was frittering away our hard-earned savings at underground gambling dens, chasing a thrill that no amount of money could satisfy. Desperate to stem the bleeding, I took matters into my own hands. I changed the locks, froze our joint accounts, and even went so far as to cancel Kevin's credit cards. Anything to halt his reckless spending before he bled us dry. Elaine, of course, was apoplectic. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. "This is my son's home, and you have no right." For once, I stood my ground, emboldened by the knowledge that I held the moral high ground. "Your son has been lying and stealing from me," I spat back, my words laced with venom. "If he wants back in, he'll have to earn it." Kevin's response was predictable, a flurry of anger and denial, punctuated by the occasional guilt trip. "You're overreacting as always," he sneered. "If you loved me, you'd trust me." But I was done being manipulated. With Megan's unwavering support, I dug in my heels, determined to uncover the full extent of his misdeeds. It was a war of attrition, with Elaine and Kevin launching salvo after salvo of emotional and psychological attacks. But I was no longer the meek, deferential wife they thought they knew. This was my life, my home, and I would fight tooth and nail to protect it. Each night, as I lay awake in Megan's spare room, my mind raced with possibilities. How far had Kevin's deception gone? What other secrets lurked beneath the surface? And, perhaps most pressing of all, how could I make them pay for their betrayal? Revenge, once a fleeting thought, had now taken root, a burning ember that I stoked with each fresh indignity. Kevin and Elaine had awoken a fury within me, and by God, they would reap the whirlwind. As the weeks dragged on, my suspicions about Kevin's financial misdeeds only deepened. Despite my efforts to cut off his access to funds, he always seemed to have a steady stream of cash flowing in, money that couldn't be explained by his legitimate income alone. It was Megan who first pointed out the discrepancies. "Look at this," she said, her brow furrowed as she pored over the bank statements I'd managed to obtain. "These deposits don't add up. There's no way he could be earning this much from his job alone." My heart sank as the realization hit me. Kevin was up to something far more nefarious than mere gambling. He was embezzling, siphoning off money from who knows where to fund his vices and Elaine's extravagant lifestyle. With Megan's help, I dug deeper, combing through financial records and piecing together a paper trail that painted an increasingly damning picture. Kevin had been skimming funds from his company's accounts, using his position as a trusted manager to cover his tracks. The evidence was mounting, but I needed more. I needed irrefutable proof, something that would hold up in court and ensure that Kevin and his wretched mother couldn't weasel their way out of facing the consequences. That's when I turned to Greg again. "I need you to follow the money trail," I instructed, my voice steely with determination. "Whatever it takes, we need to know where these funds are coming from and where they're going." Greg didn't disappoint. Through a combination of surveillance and good old-fashioned gumshoe work, he uncovered a web of deceit so intricate, so meticulously constructed, that it left me reeling. Kevin, it seemed, had been running a complex embezzlement scheme for years, funneling money into offshore accounts and using shell corporations to launder the ill-gotten gains. And at the center of it all was Elaine, the puppet master pulling the strings, using her son's greed and her own manipulative ways to bankroll their lavish lifestyle. As the pieces fell into place, a white-hot fury burned within me. These people, the ones who were supposed to be my family, had betrayed me in the most despicable way imaginable. They had stolen from me, lied to me, and tried to strip me of my dignity and self-worth. But not anymore. Clutching the thick dossier of evidence that Greg had compiled, I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Kevin and Elaine thought they had me backed into a corner, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. When they arrived at Megan's apartment, their usual arrogance was on full display. Elaine swept in first, her nose turned up in disdain, while Kevin trailed behind, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," Elaine sneered, her eyes narrowing as she took in my defiant stance. Kevin, ever the smooth talker, tried a different tack. "Jenna, please, let's be reasonable here. This has all been a big misunderstanding." I said nothing, simply tossing the dossier onto the coffee table with a loud thud. "Reasonable? You want to talk about being reasonable?" I spat, my voice dripping with contempt. "How about you explain these?" As they leafed through the damning evidence, their smug expressions melted away, replaced by a mixture of fear and outrage. For once, they were the ones left speechless, their carefully constructed lies unraveling before their very eyes. The satisfaction I felt in that moment was overwhelming. Finally, after months of torment and gaslighting, the tables had turned. Kevin and Elaine were the ones backed into a corner, their misdeeds laid bare for all to see, and I was just getting started. The look of stunned disbelief on Kevin and Elaine's faces was almost comical, if the situation hadn't been so deadly serious. As they flipped through the damning evidence, their mouths agape, I could practically see the gears turning in their twisted minds, desperately searching for a way to wriggle out of this mess they'd created. But there would be no escape. Not this time. I had them dead to rights, their web of lies and deceit exposed for all to see. "How did you get this?" Kevin stammered, his usual smooth demeanor cracking under the weight of the truth. I fixed him with a steely gaze, reveling in his discomfort. "Does it matter? The real question is, what are you going to do about it?" Elaine, ever the master manipulator, tried a different tack. "Jenna, darling, surely we can work something out," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This is all just a big misunderstanding." I scoffed, my fury rising like a tidal wave. "A misunderstanding? You really expect me to believe that?" I spat, gesturing to the damning evidence laid out before us. "You've been bleeding me dry for years, living off my hard-earned money while treating me like a doormat in my own home." Kevin's eyes narrowed, his mask of charm melting away to reveal the true monster beneath. "Watch your tone," he snarled, his voice low and menacing. "You're the one who's been making things difficult, constantly questioning my decisions and undermining my authority." The sheer audacity of his words left me momentarily speechless. Undermining his authority? As if he had any right to wield authority over me, after the way he'd betrayed me time and time again. Megan, bless her soul, stepped in before I could unleash the full force of my fury. "I think it's time for you two to leave," she said firmly, her gaze fixed on Kevin and Elaine with barely contained contempt. Elaine opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a sharp gesture. "No, let them stay," I said, my voice laced with a cold, calculated anger. "I want them to hear this." Taking a deep breath, I laid it all out, every sordid detail, every lie, every act of theft and betrayal. I spared no punches, letting the full weight of their misdeeds crash down upon them like a tidal wave. As I spoke, I could see the smug arrogance slipping from their faces, replaced by a dawning realization that this time they had gone too far. This time, there would be consequences. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steely and unwavering. "You're going to pack up your things and get out of my house. Every last penny you've stolen will be repaid, with interest. And if you so much as breathe a word of protest, I'll make sure the authorities get a nice, neat package detailing every illegal thing you've done." Silence hung heavy in the air, the weight of my ultimatum sinking in. For a brief moment, I thought Kevin might try to bluster his way out, to hurl threats and insults in a desperate bid to regain control. But then, in a move that surprised us all, Elaine deflated, the fight draining from her eyes. "Fine," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll go." Kevin, ever the dutiful son, followed her lead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As they gathered their belongings and shuffled out the door, I felt a surge of triumph unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I had won. Against all odds, I had faced down the very people who had tried to destroy me, and I had emerged victorious. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Kevin and Elaine would face the full consequences of their actions. Of that, I was certain. And as for me, well, I was just getting started. With Kevin and Elaine gone, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, unburdened by their toxic presence, but my work was far from over. I needed to ensure they faced the full consequences of their actions. Megan, ever the loyal friend, was by my side every step of the way. "We need to gather allies," she said, her brow furrowed in determination. "People who can corroborate your story, who can testify to Kevin's misdeeds." It was a tall order, but Megan was right. If we were going to take down Kevin and Elaine, we needed strength in numbers. And so we began reaching out to anyone who might have witnessed their duplicity firsthand. To my surprise, the responses poured in, a steady stream of people eager to share their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of my former in-laws. Kevin's coworkers, friends, even distant relatives, all had tales to tell of his arrogance, his greed, and his utter disregard for anyone but himself and his precious mother. As the accounts mounted, a picture began to emerge, one of a man so consumed by his own ambition and entitlement that he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, trampling over anyone who dared stand in his way. With each new revelation, my resolve hardened. These people, these victims, deserved justice as much as I did, and I would be the one to deliver it, no matter the cost. The plan was simple, yet audacious. We would gather our allies, our evidence, and our collective fury and unleash it all in one fell swoop. A public spectacle, a reckoning of sorts, where Kevin and Elaine would be forced to confront the full weight of their misdeeds. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a company gala, a lavish affair that Kevin had once reveled in, strutting about like a peacock in his designer suits and basking in the admiration of his peers. This time, however, the tables would be turned. As the guests arrived, dressed to the nines and sipping champagne, a palpable buzz of anticipation hung in the air. They knew something was afoot, but few could have predicted the bombshell that was about to drop. When the moment was right, I took the stage, my heart pounding in my chest. With Megan and our assembled allies flanking me, I laid it all bare. The lies, the deceit, the embezzlement, and the emotional torment that Kevin and Elaine had inflicted upon us all. The reaction was instant and visceral. Gasps of shock and horror rippled through the crowd, punctuated by the occasional cry of outrage. As I spoke, presenting the meticulously collected evidence, I could see the realization dawning on their faces. The man they had once admired, the man they had trusted, was nothing more than a fraud, a snake in the grass. And then, like a coup de grace, I unveiled the final piece of the puzzle. Video footage, obtained through Megan's resourcefulness, of Kevin and Elaine brazenly spending their ill-gotten gains on lavish vacations and extravagant purchases, all while pretending to be pillars of the community. The silence that followed was deafening, a collective intake of breath as the full scope of their betrayal sank in. And in that moment, I knew we had won. Kevin and Elaine, Their faces, twisted into masks of rage and humiliation, could do nothing but slink away, their reputations in tatters, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. As the dust settled and the crowd dispersed, murmuring in disbelief, I felt a sense of profound catharsis wash over me. The path ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in years, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Kevin and Elaine would face the legal consequences of their actions. Of that I was certain. But more importantly, they would never again be able to inflict their poison on anyone else. Their reign of terror was over, and I, Jenna Taylor, had been the one to bring them to their knees. It was a victory hard won, but oh how sweet it tasted. The fallout from the disastrous gala was swift and merciless. Within days, Kevin had been unceremoniously fired from his cushy corporate job, his reputation in tatters. Elaine, too, found herself cast out from the social circles she had once lorded over, her name now synonymous with greed and deceit. As for me, I watched their downfall with a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. This was just the beginning. The first step in holding them accountable for the pain and suffering they had inflicted upon me and so many others. With the evidence we had painstakingly gathered, it was only a matter of time before the legal system caught up to them. My lawyer, a bulldog of a woman named Samantha, wasted no time in filing charges for embezzlement, fraud, and a host of other white-collar crimes. They'll try to wriggle their way out of this, you know, Samantha warned me, her steely gaze fixed on the mountain of documentation before us. People like them always do. They'll plead ignorance, shift blame, anything to avoid taking responsibility. I nodded grimly, my jaw set. Then we'll be ready. We'll make sure they can't escape the consequences of their actions, not this time. True to Samantha's prediction, Kevin and Elaine fought like cornered animals, deploying every legal maneuver and underhanded tactic in their arsenal. But we were prepared, our case airtight and our resolve unshakable. As the legal proceedings dragged on, I took a perverse pleasure in watching their once lavish lifestyle crumble around them. The fancy cars, the designer clothes, the ostentatious jewelry, all of it was slowly stripped away, piece by piece, as their assets were seized and their ill-gotten gains clawed back. Elaine, in particular, seemed to take the loss of her material trappings the hardest. I'll never forget the look of abject horror on her face as the movers carted away her precious antiques and curios, the very things she had prioritized over basic human decency. "You'll pay for this, you ungrateful wretch," she screeched at me, her eyes wild and her perfectly coiffed hair askew. "You've ruined us, destroyed everything we built." I met her vitriol with a steely calm unbowed by her theatrics. "You did this to yourselves," I replied, my voice level. All I did was expose the truth. Kevin, ever the more composed of the two, tried a different tack. In the rare moments when we found ourselves face to face, he would adopt a sickly sweet tone, his words dripping with false sincerity. "Jenna, please, let's put all this nastiness behind us," he would implore, his eyes pleading. "We're family, after all. Surely we can work something out for old time's sake." But I was no longer the naive, easily manipulated woman he had once known. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw him for what he truly was, a snake, a parasite who had fed off my kindness and trust for far too long. "Save your breath, Kevin," I would reply, my voice laced with contempt. "The only thing we have to work out is how much time you'll be serving." And serve time he did, along with his precious mother. As the legal proceedings reached their climax, the weight of the evidence proved too overwhelming to ignore. Kevin was slapped with a lengthy prison sentence for his financial crimes, while Elaine received a hefty fine and probation for her role in the scheme. As they were led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. For too long, these people had operated with impunity, trampling over anyone who dared stand in their way. But no more. They had finally been brought to heel, their lofty airs and delusions of grandeur shattered. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure. The scars they had inflicted upon me would never fully heal, and the months of anguish and betrayal could never be undone. But in that moment, as I watched them being hauled off to face the consequences of their actions, I knew that I had emerged from this ordeal stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever before. Kevin and Elaine had tried to break me, but in the end, it was I who had broken them. With Kevin and Elaine finally behind bars, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The long, arduous battle had taken its toll, but I had emerged victorious. Battered, perhaps, but unbroken. As I stood in the spacious living room of my new apartment, surveying the sleek minimalist decor, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. This fresh start, this sanctuary of my own making, was a testament to my resilience, a tangible reminder that I had reclaimed control of my life. The road here had been paved with hardship and heartache, but also with the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. Megan, my rock through it all, had been by my side every step of the way, offering her steadfast friendship and sage advice whenever the doubts crept in. And then there was Scarlett, my cousin, whose generosity had made this new beginning possible. When she'd heard of my plight, she hadn't hesitated to offer me the keys to this stunning high-rise apartment, a sanctuary far removed from the toxic memories of my former life. "Consider it a fresh start," she had insisted, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've been through hell, Jenna. It's time you had a place of your own, a place where you can heal and rebuild." As I unpacked the final box, carefully arranging my cherished mementos on the sleek shelves, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, winding path that had brought me here. The betrayal, the anguish, the all-consuming fury, it had all been worth it, if only to arrive at this moment of hard-won peace. Of course, not everyone had been so fortunate. Kevin and Elaine, those architects of my suffering, were now behind bars, their grand delusions of wealth and status reduced to a distant memory. From what I'd heard through the grapevine, their fall from grace had been steep and unforgiving. Kevin, once the smooth-talking corporate climber, had been reduced to a hollow shell of a man, his bravado evaporating in the harsh reality of prison life. Elaine, too, had found herself adrift, her once formidable social standing decimated by the revelations of her misdeeds. A small, petty part of me relished in their misery, reveled in the knowledge that they were finally getting a taste of the pain and humiliation they had so callously inflicted upon me and others. But as the days turned into weeks, that vindictive urge faded, replaced by a sense of weary acceptance. They had been the masters of their own undoing, their greed and hubris ultimately proving to be their downfall. As for me, I had emerged from the crucible tempered and anew, ready to forge a life truly worth living. The housewarming party that Megan had insisted on throwing was a testament to just how far I'd come. As I surveyed the gathered crowd of friends, old and new, I was struck by the outpouring of love and support. "To Jenna," Megan declared, raising her glass in a toast, "the strongest, most resilient woman I know. You've been through hell and back, but you never gave up. You never let the bastards grind you down." A chorus of cheers and laughter erupted, buoying my spirits and filling me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. These people, these wonderful, caring individuals, were my true family, the ones who had stood by me when the chips were down, who had believed in me even when I had doubted myself. As the night wore on and the laughter and conversation flowed, I found myself reflecting on the long, winding journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the heartache, the soul-crushing betrayal, it had all been a crucible, a trial by fire that had forged me into the woman I was today. And as I looked around at the smiling faces of my friends, my chosen family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. For I was Jenna Taylor, survivor and warrior, and my story was just beginning. "Matt, are you really going to miss the birth of your child just to close a deal?" "Deal's worth more than you're ever going to be, Stacy," Matt replied, his voice cold and detached as he fixed his tie. I stared at him, a lump forming in my throat. How did we get to this point? At 36 weeks pregnant and on maternity leave, I had slowly become accustomed to Matt's increasing absence. His real estate career consumed him, leaving little room for our marriage. Before my pregnancy, I was a dedicated marketing executive. Now, my days were filled with preparing for our baby boy, while Matt's days were filled with contracts and property viewings. Angie, my best friend since college, had been an incredible support. "Stacy, you need to stop worrying about Matt and focus on yourself and the baby," she often said, her voice firm but kind. "Easy for you to say," I replied once, tears pooling in my eyes. "You're not married to a ghost." Angie squeezed my hand. "You deserve better. Remember that. My parents, Lydia and Fred, lived nearby and were another source of steadiness in this storm. Dad helped set up the nursery, while Mom fussed over me, making sure I ate well and rested. "Stacy, darling, you need to take it easy," Mom reminded me as she set a plate of food in front of me. "Stress isn't good for the baby." "Thanks, Mom." I forced a smile, eyes darting to my phone, hoping irrationally for a message from Matt. But there was nothing. Days turned into nights, and Matt's empty promises became a grim routine. He'd drag himself home late, reeking of deals and desperation. "Busy night?" I asked one evening when he finally stumbled in. "Don't start, Stacy. I closed a huge deal today," he snapped, barely glancing at me. The tension grew, but I clung to hope that the birth of our child would bring him back to us. One late afternoon, while resting on the couch, the door clicked open. "Hey, Matt," I began, only for my words to trail off as Angie walked in. "Matt's not here?" I shook my head. "Out with clients again." She sighed deeply. "Come on, let's get you out for a walk. Clear your head." We strolled slowly down our tree-lined street, Angie chatting about her latest project at work. The normalcy of it was a balm, if only temporary. Back home, I shuffled through the nursery, adjusting tiny socks and folding baby clothes. The car arrived, signaling Matt's return. "Matt, can we talk?" I began quietly. "Not now, Stacy," he murmured, eyes glued to his phone. I bit my lip, fighting the urge to scream. How long could this continue? I placed a hand on my belly, feeling a tiny kick. Soon, I reminded myself. As the days passed, one question haunted me. Could Matt be the father our son needed? "Mom, what am I going to do?" I found myself asking during another quiet dinner. "One step at a time, Stacy," she replied gently. "We'll be here for you, no matter what." Matt's phone buzzed with another urgent message, and he picked up without hesitation. I glanced at him, heart heavy. The baby kicked again, a fierce reminder of the life about to change. "Matt," I tried again, voice trembling, "please be here when I need you, when our son needs you." He looked up briefly, a flicker of something in his eyes before it vanished. "I'll do my best, Stacy." But his best, I feared, wouldn't be enough. The pain hit suddenly, sharp and twisting. I doubled over, gripping the kitchen counter. "Mom," I cried out, struggling to catch my breath. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Matt. Without even looking, I knew he wasn't coming. "Stacy, what's wrong?" Mom rushed in, panic in her eyes. "I think it's time," I panted. Mom grabbed the hospital bag, guiding me to the car as Dad fired up the engine. "Hang in there, sweetie. We're almost there," Dad reassured me. We made it to the hospital, nurses swiftly taking charge. I clutched Mom's hand as we moved down the brightly lit corridors. "Call Matt," I gasped between contractions. "I've called him 5 times, Mom said, worry etched on her face. "He's not answering." Hours felt like days as the contractions grew stronger. The hospital room blurred, white walls closing in. "You're doing great, Stacy," Mom cooed, wiping my forehead. With every push, all I could think about was Matt not being here, about him treating our child as less important than his precious deals. I ground my teeth, focusing on the baby's need to come out healthy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a wail filled the room. My son, my beautiful Nathan. "He's perfect, Stacy," Mom said, tears streaming down her face as she handed him to me. I gazed at Nathan, emotions flooding me. The joy of holding him battled with the heartbreak of Matt's absence. As Nathan nestled in my arms, I forced myself to focus on his tiny face, his small breath against my skin. "Meeting ran late. I'll come by later." Matt's text felt like a slap. I stared at his words, a cold anger growing inside me. Meeting ran late. Nothing about the birth of his son, just empty words delaying his inevitable absence. "Mom, he'll never change, will he?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. "One step at a time, honey," Mom replied, her voice breaking. Hours drifted by and Nathan fell asleep. Exhaustion took over and I dozed off with a tight grip on his little hand. I awoke to the shuffle of footsteps and the faint beep of machines, but no sign of Matt. Angie appeared, relief on her face. "How are you holding up, new mama? Look at him, Angie." I said, my voice fragile. "He's so beautiful." Angie leaned in to see Nathan, her expression softening. "He's perfect, Stacy. I'm sorry Matt's not here. You deserved better." Angie's words mirrored my own thoughts. Could I keep on hoping when it was clear Matt was never going to come through for us? Evening came, still no Matt. Nurses looked at me with kind pity, as did other new mothers with their partners by their sides. Stacy, it's been a long day, Mom said gently. Rest up, we'll take care of things. Nodding, I lay back, Nathan sleeping in his crib beside me. As fatigue pulled me under, one thing was painfully clear. Matt might never prioritize us. But as I glanced at Nathan, I knew I had to find a way forward. For him. For both of us. The hospital room door creaked open, and there stood Matt, looking at his phone instead of us. I glanced up from Nathan, my heart heavy with disappointment. Finally decided to show up, I said, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. Yeah, got here as soon as I could, he murmured, eyes still glued to his screen. You missed our son's birth, Matt, I said softly, anger simmering just beneath the surface. He looked up briefly, barely glancing at Nathan before his gaze shifted back to his phone. I had important clients, Stacy. It's not like you were alone. Your parents were here. I shook my head, disbelief all over my face. He's your son. Doesn't that matter to you? Matt sighed, slipping his phone into his pocket and finally stepping closer. He peered at Nathan, then back at me. I'm here now, aren't I? I didn't have the energy to argue. Just hold him, I said, handing Nathan over. Matt held Nathan awkwardly, like he was a foreign object. His disconnect was palpable. We need to talk, Matt, I began, watching him closely. About us. About what's been happening. Now? In the hospital? He scoffed, eyebrow raised. Yes, now. This can't wait, I insisted. Our family can't wait. He handed Nathan back, turning towards the window. What do you want me to say, Stacy? I'm trying to provide for us, to give us a good life. A good life? I echoed, incredulous. A good life where you're never home? Where you miss the birth of your own child because of a meeting? You knew what you were marrying into, he snapped, finally locking eyes with me. I told you my career was demanding. But I didn't sign up for this neglect, I countered, keeping my voice steady. You were different before. Where did that man go? People change, Stacy. This is who I am now. Deal with it. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What about Nathan? What kind of father will you be to him? I'll provide for him. Isn't that what matters? He said coldly. Mom re-entered the room, sensing the tension. Everything okay here? Fine, Mom, I replied, forcing a smile. Just talking. Matt pulled out his phone again, an unmistakable signal that the conversation was over for him. I have to head back to the office. I'll check in later. And just like that, he was gone. A few days later, I was discharged. As we arrived home, Matt was nowhere to be found. Instead, my parents were there, ready to help with Nathan's adjustment. Welcome home, they exclaimed, bringing a small moment of joy. They helped me inside, talking about the future, but my mind kept drifting back to Matt's coldness. Flashbacks of our happy days taunted me, shared breakfasts, silly arguments over movies, and plans for a future that now seemed impossible. As I settled Nathan into his crib, I whispered, We'll be okay, little one. I promise. Then, in a burst of determination, I pulled out my laptop and started searching. For answers, for help, for a way forward. Matt's neglect and ambition had pushed me to the edge, but for Nathan's sake, I would fight. He deserved better than this. We both did. Dad offered a comforting hug. We're here for you, Stacy, whatever you need. I nodded, with tears finally spilling over. Thank you, Dad. I'm going to need all the help I can get. I settled Nathan into his crib and stepped into the living room, where Matt sat with his laptop, typing away. The tension was thick as I took a deep breath. Matt, we need to talk about our finances, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced up briefly, a hint of annoyance on his face. What about them? How much have you spent on the condo? I asked, my palms sweaty. It's an investment, Stacy, he replied dismissively, eyes drifting back to his screen. It'll pay off. An investment with our savings? I pressed, voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. And loans? He looked up again, irritation clear. You don't understand how business works. I understand that you're risking our future for it, I stated, struggling to keep my composure. Matt finally closed his laptop, glaring at me. This is about providing for our family and making sure we have the best. Or is it about impressing your father? I shot back, the words out before I could stop them. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't bring my father into this. He's already in it, Matt. You're trying to impress him at our expense, I accused, the pieces falling into place. Just then, the front door opened and Greg walked in. He raised an eyebrow at the tension. Am I interrupting something? No, Greg, just catching up on business, Matt said, his demeanor suddenly cooler. Greg smirked, nodding toward me. Stacy, you good? I nodded, taking a deep breath. Yeah, I'm fine. After an awkward pause, Greg turned to Matt. Did you tell her about the plan with the inheritance? I froze, eyes wide. What plan? Matt's face turned beet red. Greg, that's none of her concern. Greg shrugged. She's your wife, she should know. What plan, Matt? I demanded, stepping closer. Matt's jaw tightened. It's nothing, just a way to secure our family's future. He's using Nathan to gain favor with Daddy, Greg interjected, ignoring Matt's glare. Hoping a grandkid in his corner seals the deal. Is that true, Matt? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Matt remained silent, his expression a cold mask. That silence said more than words ever could. I turned to Greg. Do you know how much debt Matt's gotten us into? Greg frowned. I didn't know the extent, but I figured it was bad. It's worse than you think, I murmured, feeling the weight of our situation. Good to know where your priorities are, Matt, Greg said disdainfully. I always knew you were a piece of work, but this? Using your kid? Matt snapped. Mind your own business, Greg. Greg shrugged, just looking out for Stacy and Nathan here. Unlike some people. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I turned to Matt. We're done, Matt. I can't do this anymore. Stacy, don't be dramatic, he scoffed. We're just going through a rough patch. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. This isn't a rough patch. It's our life, and you've ruined it. With that, I walked past Matt, past Greg, and into the room where Nathan slept peacefully, unaware of the storm outside. I knew one thing for certain. I had to protect him from this mess, from Matt's reckless ambition. The fight was just beginning, and I had to be ready. Greg's parting words echoed in my mind. If you need help, Stacy, you know where to find me. The door slammed behind me as I carried Nathan to the car, my heart racing. We're staying with my parents for a while, I said through gritted teeth, not even looking back at Matt. Stacy, don't do this. You're overreacting. Matt called after me. Ignoring him, I strapped Nathan into his car seat and started the engine. I drove in silence, anger and sorrow fighting for control. Upon reaching my parents' house, Mom and Dad were waiting on the porch, concern etched in their faces. What's happening? Dad asked as he took Nathan from my arms. Matt, he's ruining our lives with his schemes, I said, barely holding back tears. Inside, Mom offered me a hot tea while Dad rocked Nathan gently. Tell us everything, Mom urged. Between sips of tea, I recounted the details, the debt, the condo, Matt's twisted plan. Their expressions darkened with every word. He has the nerve to use Nathan as a pawn, Dad growled, his protective instincts kicking in. We'll sort this out. Later that evening, while Nathan napped, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Matt. We need to talk. Come home. I shook my head, knowing a meeting would only end in more frustration. Instead, I opened my laptop and began searching for legal advice. A fighting spirit gripped me. I couldn't let Matt ruin our lives. Days turned into a week. My parents helped with Nathan, providing a stable environment I sorely needed. Meanwhile, I met with several lawyers, finally retaining a fierce one who assured me I'd have a fighting chance. A knock on my parents' door startled me one evening. I opened it to find Matt standing there, an unfamiliar coldness in his eyes. Stacy, enough of this game. Come home, he demanded. This isn't a game, Matt. You've jeopardized our future, I replied, standing firm. You're making a big mistake, he sneered. Make this easy and come back. I crossed my arms, blocking the door. I won't let you drag Nathan and me down with you. Fine, he spat, tossing an envelope at me. Divorce papers. You're holding me back anyway. I stared at the envelope, shock rendering me speechless. Matt turned and walked away without another word. Mom came to stand beside me, her presence grounding me. What did he want? He's divorcing me, I whispered, the weight of the words crushing. Mom hugged me tight. We'll get through this, Stacy, together. Returning inside, I flipped through the papers. Anger welled up. Matt had not only left me, but he had also outlined visitation rights and property divisions that favored him outrageously. No way would I let him get away with this. Days later, I learned from mutual friends in whispered conversations that Matt had moved in with a wealthy client, Celeste. The betrayal added fuel to my fire. Mom, Dad, I'm fighting back. I'm not letting Matt walk over me, I declared one morning. Good for you, Dad said, pride in his voice. Angie also stepped up, offering support. You've got this, Stacy. Nathan deserves better, and so do you. Preparations began in earnest. my lawyer gathered evidence of Matt's neglect and financial recklessness. Greg's surprising support came as an unexpected boon. He hated Matt's tactics as much as I did. One evening, Greg said, "Stacy, if you need anything, count on me. Matt's dug his own grave and I'll help you cover him up." Nathan cooed in his crib while I fed him, my resolve strengthening. "We're going to be okay, Nathan. I'll make sure of it." Despite Matt's attempts to drag us down, I felt a growing sense of purpose. The courtroom confrontation was coming, and I knew I had to be ready. For Nathan. For our future. For justice. Courtrooms always felt cold, no matter the season. Sitting beside my lawyer, Mrs. Hayes, the tension in the air thickened. Matt sat across from us with his attorney, looking smug as ever. "Your Honor," Mrs. Hayes began, her voice strong and clear, "we present evidence of Mr. Miller's financial recklessness and neglectful behavior towards his family." My heart pounded as she laid out documents showing Matt's misuse of our savings and the loans he'd taken without my knowledge. Pictures of unfinished nursery projects and messages ignored while I was in labor flashed on the screen. Matt's attorney, Mr. Collins, tried to counter. "These are measures Mr. Miller took to ensure financial stability. His investment in the condo is for the family's benefit." Mrs. Hayes didn't miss a beat. "That so-called investment jeopardizes their future. More importantly, Mr. Miller's neglect cannot be justified." She turned towards me, offering a reassuring nod. "Stacy, could you explain how Mr. Miller's actions have impacted your life and the life of your son?" I stood, my legs slightly trembling but my voice steady. "Matt has been absent, physically and emotionally. He missed our son's birth because he was at a meeting. He took our savings and put us in debt for a condo to impress clients and gain his father's approval. And now he's living with another woman, showing zero regard for our family." Matt fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable with the spotlight on his failures. A few days later, while preparing for another round in court, a knock on my door revealed Greg. "I have something that might help," he said, handing over a folder. I opened it to find emails and text messages, proof of Matt's deceit and manipulation. "That deal with Celeste, the financial strain, it's all here," Greg said. "Use it." The next day in court, Mrs. Hayes presented Greg's evidence. "Your Honor, these documents show Mr. Miller's manipulation of his own wife and his financial recklessness." Matt's face drained of color as every dirty detail was laid bare before the judge. As court recessed, I overheard Matt arguing with Celeste on a phone call. "I did this for us. You knew what this was." He barked, but the line went dead. Celeste had hung up on him. His relationship with her crumbling was a small but satisfying vindication. Back in session, Matt was forced to admit his failings under cross-examination. His facade was crumbling, and the courtroom could see it. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice firm and decisive. "Given the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Miller's actions were detrimental to the family's welfare. Full custody of Nathan Miller is awarded to Stacy Miller. Mr. Miller is required to sell the condo to settle debts and provide appropriate financial support to Stacy Miller and their son." A weight lifted off my shoulders. Relief washed over me as I hugged Mrs. Hayes, tears of gratitude streaming down my face. Matt looked utterly defeated, his once certain arrogance replaced by a grim realization of his downfall. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a new strength within me. I clutched Nathan close, knowing the fight had been worth it. "Stacy, you did it," Mom said, embracing me outside the courthouse. "We did it," I corrected, looking at my family and friends who stood by me. Greg approached with a small smile. "Told you could count on me." "Thank you, Greg," I said sincerely. As the crowd thinned, Angie squeezed my hand. "What's next, Stacy?" I looked at Nathan, then back at her. "We start fresh, build a new life, one step at a time." We walked away from the courthouse, the future suddenly filled with possibilities. For Nathan. For me. For a new beginning without Matt's shadow looming over us. It was time to rebuild, stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever came next. Sitting in the courtroom once more was nerve-wracking, but I held my head high. This was the final showdown. Matt sat across from me, eyes cold and resentful. His facade of control was slipping, and everyone could see it. The judge's gavel came down, calling the court to order. Mrs. Hayes stood up, ready for battle. "Your Honor, today we present further evidence showing Mr. Miller's ongoing neglect and financial irresponsibility." She displayed bank statements and documents, highlighting the depths of Matt's financial mess. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of his recklessness. Matt's lawyer, Mr. Collins, tried to object. "Your Honor, these were extreme measures taken to secure a better future for the family." The judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Continue, Mrs. Hayes." She nodded and gestured toward Greg, who took the stand. "Greg Miller, could you tell the court what you know about your brother's actions?" Greg cleared his throat. "Matt was always trying to impress our father. He used Stacy and Nathan to get ahead, using family money recklessly. He even tried manipulating Celeste, but that backfired. I watched Matt squirm, trying to maintain his composure, but failing." Mrs. Hayes pressed on. "And what did you do when you discovered this?" "I gave Stacy the evidence to show how deceitful and irresponsible Matt has been," Greg answered. Matt shot Greg a venomous look. "You've always been jealous. This is all about making me look bad." Greg's face remained impassive. "No, Matt. This is about doing what's right." The judge leaned forward, her expression stern. "Mr. Naff Miller, it's evident from the testimonies and evidence that your actions have been detrimental to your family. Stacy has shown great resilience, and it's clear she prioritizes Nathan's well-being. Therefore, I will uphold my previous ruling. Full custody remains with Stacy, and you will comply with all financial obligations." I exhaled, relief washing over me. Matt looked shattered as the realization of his defeat set in. As we exited the courtroom, he approached me one last time. "Stacy, you don't have to do this. We can work something out." I shook my head firmly. "You had your chances, Matt. This is what's best for Nathan." His eyes narrowed, revealing his vile nature once more. "You'll regret this." I met his gaze head on. "No, Matt. You're the one who'll regret losing us." Outside the courthouse, Angie met me with a tight hug. "It's finally over." "Yes, it is," I said, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in months. Mom and Dad joined us, their pride evident. "We knew you could do it," Dad said, his voice filled with emotion. Greg approached, an awkward smile on his face. "I'm just glad I could help." "You did more than that, Greg," I said, giving him a grateful hug. "Thank you." He nodded, stepping back to let me have my moment with Nathan. Holding my son close, I whispered, "We did it, little one. We're free." As the days passed, Matt's financial situation worsened. He was forced to sell the condo, and his relationship with Celeste dissolved entirely. His professional reputation crumbled, and he was left grappling with the mess he'd created. Meanwhile, I focused on the future. With the legal battles behind us, I began to rebuild our lives. I returned to work in marketing, finding joy in my career once more. Nathan thrived in the loving environment my parents, friends, and I provided. One night, as Nathan slept peacefully, I glanced around our cozy home, feeling a wave of gratitude. The journey had been rough, but we emerged stronger. Karma had served its due course, and now it was time to embrace the new horizons ahead. I promised myself and Nathan that we'd face whatever came next with courage, resilience, and hope. The storm had passed, and we were ready to bask in the sunlight of new beginnings. Balancing work and motherhood proved challenging, yet rewarding. Every morning started with Nathan's cheerful giggles, a sound that fueled my day. I'd drop him off at Mom and Dad's, knowing he was in good hands, before heading to the office. "Morning, Stacy," Angie said, greeting me with a warm smile as I walked in. "Morning. Ready for the big presentation?" I asked, feeling the familiar rush of excitement. "Absolutely. Let's knock it out of the park," she replied, sharing my enthusiasm. Work offered a much-needed sense of normalcy and purpose. I threw myself into projects determined to showcase my skills and rebuild my career. My team rallied around me, respecting the balance I struck between being a professional and a mother. Back at home, evenings were filled with laughter and warmth. Nathan took his first steps, and I celebrated every milestone with my parents. Life started feeling like a new kind of normal. One evening, while feeding Nathan, my phone buzzed. A text from Greg. "Can we meet? Need to discuss something important." Curious but cautious, I agreed. We met at a local cafe where Greg's expression was serious. "Stacy, there's something you need to know," he began, his tone grave. "Matt's been trying to undermine you at the office, spreading lies to our father, hoping to turn him against you." My heart clenched. "Why won't he just leave us alone?" "Because he can't stand losing," Greg replied. "But listen, I've got an idea. There's still money involved from Dad's business, and I want to make sure Matt doesn't get his hands on it. I nodded, desperate to protect Nathan's future. What do you need from me? Just your support. Together, we can redirect Dad's investments to benefit Nathan. It's what he would have wanted, Greg explained. It was risky, but I trusted Greg. All right, let's do this. Over the next few weeks, Greg and I worked tirelessly to secure the investments. We presented our case to his father, backed by evidence of Matt's manipulations. The old man listened, eventually agreeing to our plan. Matt's downfall continued. His schemes backfired, and he was left to grapple with the repercussions. Meanwhile, Greg and I ensured that Nathan's future was secure. One day, while playing with Nathan at the park, I felt a deep sense of peace. Angie joined us, watching Nathan toddle around with a grin on her face. "How's it feel to finally have everything sorted?" she asked. "Honestly, it's freeing," I responded, watching my son's joyful expression. "I didn't think we'd get here." Angie patted my shoulder. "You're stronger than you ever knew." As the days passed, Matt's presence in our lives faded. He struggled to find stability, his once promising career in shambles. Karma had come full circle, and he was forced to face the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, I thrived. My career flourished, and Nathan grew up in a loving, supportive environment. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving, building a future full of hope and promise. In a final gesture of gratitude, I decided to help Greg. His loyalty and support had been invaluable. Redirecting some of the investments to aid his startup, I ensured that Matt's former schemes benefited someone who truly deserved it. One evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch with Nathan in my lap, feeling a deep sense of contentment. I had fought hard, and it had paid off. The future looked bright, and I was ready for whatever came next. Looking at the horizon, I whispered, "We've come a long way, little one. This is just the beginning." Nathan giggled, and I smiled, filled with hope and confidence. We were ready to embrace our new horizons together, stronger than ever. I slumped onto the couch, utterly drained from the day's events. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, struggling to process Larry's bombshell revelation. As I stared blankly at the wall, his words echoed in my head like a broken record. "I got Kara pregnant. We need to talk about a divorce, June." Those 9 words shattered the life I had known, sending shockwaves through my very core. Kara, my supposed best friend since childhood, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way, by having an affair with my husband Larry. And now, she carried his child, a living embodiment of their deceit. I couldn't help but let out a bitter chuckle as I remembered the envelope I had been safeguarding for years, the divorce papers I had prepared just in case. Little did I know that the day would come when I'd have to pull them out, not for my own protection, but because of Larry's unfaithfulness. Reaching into the drawer, I retrieved the envelope and slid out the crisp documents. With a deep breath, I handed them to Larry, whose expression was a mixture of shock and guilt. "Here you go, Larry," I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. "The divorce papers I've had ready for this very day." Larry's mouth hung open, rendered speechless by my preparedness. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction in catching him off guard. "June, he began, but I held up my hand, silencing him. "Save it, Larry. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I won't be made a fool of anymore." I stood up, suddenly feeling a surge of strength and determination. This was the moment I had been bracing myself for. The moment when I would reclaim my life and leave behind the betrayal and lies. "Pack your things and get out," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "I don't want to see your face again." Larry's eyes widened, but he knew better than to argue. He had played his hand, and now it was my turn to take control. As he gathered his belongings, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the charade was finally over, and I could begin the process of healing and moving on. The door slammed shut behind him, and I was left alone in the silence. But for the first time in a long while, the silence felt liberating, not oppressive. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, and nothing would stand in my way. In the days following Larry's departure, a heavy silence settled over our suburban Denver home. The once familiar surroundings now felt foreign, reminders of the life I had known slowly crumbling around me. As I navigated this new reality, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. Larry's behavior in the weeks leading up to his confession had been odd, to say the least. He was constantly glued to his phone, typing away furiously at all hours of the day and night. Whenever I questioned him about it, he dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand and a mumbled excuse about work. But I knew better. I had seen that kind of behavior before, back when my ex-boyfriend Alex had cheated on me during our college years. The secrecy, the lies, the constant need to be on his phone, it was all too familiar, and it had left me with a deep-seated mistrust that never truly went away. As I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of our once happy life, I couldn't help but flash back to those painful memories. The hurt, the betrayal, the overwhelming sense of not being enough. It all came rushing back, like a tidal wave crashing over me. And yet, even in the midst of my despair, a tiny flicker of anger began to burn within me. How could Larry, the man I had trusted with my heart and my life, do this to me? How could he so callously disregard the vows we had made, the promises we had exchanged? The more I thought about it, the more the anger grew, fueled by the realization that Kara, my supposed best friend, had been in on the whole charade. The two of them sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face. It was a betrayal so deep, so profound, that it shook me to my very core. I found myself replaying every interaction, every conversation, searching for clues that I had missed. Had Kara's overly friendly behavior towards Larry been a sign? Had her constant presence in our lives been a ploy to get closer to him? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more painful than the last. But amidst the hurt and the anger, a newfound resolve began to take shape. I would not be a victim in this twisted web of deceit. I would not allow myself to be cast aside like a piece of trash, discarded and forgotten. No, I would rise above it all, and I would make them pay for what they had done to me. Larry and Kara may have thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming their way. This was just the beginning, and I was ready to fight, for my dignity, for my self-respect, and for the life I deserved. Just when I thought the betrayal couldn't sting anymore, life decided to twist the knife even deeper. Kara, the so-called friend who had slept with my husband and gotten herself pregnant, was moving back to town. The universe really did have a sick sense of humor. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. Surely, Kara wouldn't be brazen enough to rub her conquest in my face by settling down in the same town where she had destroyed my marriage. But as the weeks passed and her presence became more and more apparent, the truth became impossible to ignore. She was everywhere. At the grocery store, the coffee shop, even the park where I used to take leisurely strolls. Each time I saw her, a sickening feeling would rise in the pit of my stomach, a combination of rage and betrayal so potent that it threatened to consume me. And then there was Larry. My soon-to-be ex-husband, who had once sworn to love and cherish me, now seemed to gravitate towards Kara like a moth to a flame. Whenever I saw them together, a twisted sense of camaraderie radiating between them, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "June, you're being ridiculous." Larry would scoff whenever I raised my concerns. "Kara's my friend, too. There's nothing going on." Friend. The word left a bitter taste in my mouth. How could he be so blasé about the woman who had helped him demolish our marriage, our family? How could he not see the blatant disrespect in their constant togetherness? But Larry was blind to it all. Or perhaps he simply didn't care. Either way, his dismissive attitude only fueled the fire burning within me. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, stewing in my anger, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Kara standing on my doorstep, a sickeningly sweet smile plastered across her face. "Hey, bestie," she cooed, as if nothing had changed between us. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." I couldn't believe her audacity. This woman, who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, had the nerve to show up at my doorstep, acting as if we were still the closest of friends. "Don't you dare call me that," I spat, my voice dripping with venom. "You're no friend of mine, not after what you did." Kara's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "June, come on. We've been friends forever. Surely you're not going to let a little thing like this come between us?" A little thing? I could feel my blood boiling at her callous disregard for the pain she had caused. "Get out," I growled, my fists clenched at my sides. And don't ever show your face around me again, you lying, deceitful snake. With that, I slammed the door in her face, leaving her stunned on the other side. As I leaned against the closed door, tears of rage streaming down my cheeks, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not let them win. No matter what it took, I would have my revenge. As if the betrayal of my husband and supposed best friend wasn't enough, the universe decided to pile on even more misery. Larry's mother, Evelyn, had been struggling with dementia for years, and it had finally reached a point where she could no longer live on her own. Guess who got saddled with the responsibility of being her full-time caregiver? Yep, that's right. Me. Larry, in all his infinite wisdom, decided that I was the perfect person to take on this burden, despite the fact that our marriage was crumbling around us. And of course, when I protested, he played the guilt card like a master manipulator. June, you know how much my mom means to me, he pleaded. Those puppy dog eyes that used to melt my heart now only filling me with disgust. I can't bear the thought of putting her in a home. Please do this for me. Do it for him? After everything he'd done, he had the audacity to ask me for favors? But I knew better than to argue. Larry had a way of twisting words and emotions, using my own fears and insecurities against me. So, like a fool, I agreed. And that's how I found myself spending my days caring for a woman who had never truly accepted me. Evelyn had always been critical of me, making snide remarks about my cooking, my cleaning, my very existence in her son's life. But now, in her more lucid moments, she would reach for my hand, her eyes pleading with me for help, for comfort. It was a twisted game of push and pull, one that left me emotionally and physically drained. One minute she would be cursing my name, calling me a useless burden on her family. The next, she would be begging me to stay, to not leave her alone. Through it all, Larry remained absent, both physically and emotionally. His visits were few and far between, and when he did show up, he was distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. No doubt he was off gallivanting with Kara, living the life he had always dreamed of, while I was stuck in this living nightmare. The weight of it all was suffocating. I found myself longing for the days when my biggest worry was whether or not Larry would remember to pick up milk on his way home from work. Now, my days were filled with cleaning up messes, administering medication, and trying to reason with a woman who was slowly losing her grip on reality. And yet, despite the challenges, despite the constant barrage of insults and ingratitude, there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of loyalty to Evelyn. After all, she was the mother of the man I had once loved more than anything in this world. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, that loyalty began to wear thin. Larry's manipulation, his utter disregard for my well-being, had pushed me to the brink of my own sanity. And slowly, a burning desire for revenge began to take root within me. If he thought he could just discard me like a piece of trash, leaving me to care for his ailing mother while he cavorted with his mistress, he had another thing coming. I may have agreed to play the dutiful wife for now, but mark my words, I would have my vengeance, and it would be sweet. The straw that finally broke the camel's back came in the form of a private investigator's report. After months of suspicion and gut-wrenching uncertainty, I finally had the truth laid bare before me. Larry and Kara's sordid affair, complete with dates, times, and locations of their trysts. As I pored over the damning evidence, a strange sense of calm washed over me. There was no more room for doubt, no more excuses to cling to. The betrayal was real, and it cut deeper than any knife ever could. But amidst the pain, a newfound resolve began to take root. I was done being the victim, the dutiful wife who turned a blind eye to her husband's indiscretions. It was time to take action, to reclaim my life and my dignity. First, though, I had to deal with the ever-present thorn in my side. My mother. Bless her heart, she meant well, but her outdated beliefs and unwavering loyalty to the patriarchy were suffocating me. June, honey, you have to think about this, she pleaded, her voice laced with concern. A divorce would ruin your family, ruin Larry's life. You need to stand by your man, for better or worse. Stand by my man? The audacity of such a statement made my blood boil. Had she not seen the evidence, the cold, hard proof of his betrayal? Mom, with all due respect, Larry made his choices, I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. He chose to cheat, to lie, to disrespect our marriage vows. I won't be made a fool of any longer. My mother's eyes widened, taken aback by my newfound assertiveness. But before she could protest further, I held up a hand to silence her. This is my decision, and it's final. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. With that, I turned on my heel and left her sputtering in the living room. No more excuses, no more justifications. It was time to take control of my life. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly, laying the groundwork for my revenge. I consulted with lawyers, gathered evidence, and made contingency plans. All the while, I played the part of the dutiful wife, lulling Larry into a false sense of security. And then, when the time was right, I struck. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when I called Larry into the living room, a stack of papers clutched in my hand. He ambled in, unsuspecting, that dopey grin on his face that used to make my heart flutter. "What's up, honey?" he asked, plopping down on the couch. Without a word, I tossed the stack of papers onto his lap. Divorce papers, already filled out and signed by me. Larry's eyes widened in shock as he flipped through the pages, realization dawning on his face. "June, what is this? You can't be serious." "Oh, but I am," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "You brought this on yourself, Larry. Now it's time to face the consequences." As he scrambled to his feet, pleading and begging for another chance, I simply turned my back and walked away. No more words needed to be said. The die had been cast, and there was no turning back. Revenge, it seemed, would be mine after all. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. As I stood in the living room, facing Larry and Kara, it was like a scene straight out of a twisted drama. The two of them, huddled together on the couch, their faces etched with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "June, please," Larry began, his voice trembling. "Let's talk about this. We can work things out." "Work things out?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "Work things out? You really have some nerve, Larry." I turned my gaze towards Kara, who couldn't even meet my eyes. "And you, my supposed best friend, how could you do this to me?" Kara mumbled something under her breath, but I held up a hand to silence her. "Save it. I don't want to hear any more of your lies." Larry rose to his feet, desperation written all over his face. "June, think about this. A divorce would ruin me. My career, my reputation, everything would be destroyed." For a moment, a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Was I really ready to upend our lives like this? But then I remembered the pain, the betrayal, the countless nights spent crying myself to sleep, and that doubt evaporated like smoke. "That's not my problem anymore, Larry," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Kara finally found her voice, her eyes brimming with tears. "June, please. We never meant to hurt you. It just happened." It just happened?" I repeated incredulously. "You betrayed me in the worst possible way, and you have the audacity to make excuses?" I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, a white-hot rage that had been simmering for months. "You know what, Kara? You're not my friend anymore. Why, in fact, you're nothing to me. Both of you can go to hell." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, suffocating us all with their finality. Larry opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off before he could start. "Don't even try it, Larry. This is over. Done. Finished. I want you out of this house by the end of the day." Kara let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. Larry, on the other hand, simply stared at me in stunned silence, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. "June, please," he tried again, desperation seeping into his voice. "I'll do anything. Just don't do this." But I was done listening, done making excuses for his behavior. With a shake of my head, I turned and walked away, leaving them to their misery. As I climbed the stairs, each step felt lighter, as if a massive weight was being lifted from my shoulders. The lies, the deceit, the constant sense of betrayal, it was all finally behind me. In that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, I would be okay. I had survived the unthinkable, and I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. Larry and Kara may have thought they had won, but in the end, it was me who had reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my life. And as I closed the bedroom door behind me, I couldn't help but smile. Revenge, it seemed, was truly a dish best served cold. The next few hours were a blur of activity, punctuated by the sounds of shouting and slamming doors. True to my word, I was kicking Larry out of our home, and he was not going quietly. June, please, let's talk about this, he pleaded, his voice a mixture of desperation and anger. You can't just throw me out on the street. I steeled myself against his protests, focusing instead on the task at hand. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I began gathering his belongings, clothes, books, personal effects, and tossing them haphazardly into boxes and bags. June, stop this madness, he shouted, grabbing my arm in a futile attempt to halt my progress. Think about what you're doing. I twisted out of his grasp, my eyes blazing with a fury I had never felt before. Don't you dare touch me, Larry. You lost that right a long time ago. Kara, bless her soul, had wisely chosen to remove herself from the situation, retreating to who knows where, but even her absence couldn't dampen the raging fire within me. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The chance to excise the cancer that had been slowly poisoning my life. With each item I packed, each memory I boxed away, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I would be damned if I let Larry's betrayal taint it any longer. June, please, I'm begging you, he tried again, his voice cracking with emotion. I can make things right, I swear. Just give me another chance. Another chance? The absurdity of his request nearly made me laugh out loud. How many chances had I given him already, only to have them thrown back in my face? You had your chance, Larry, I said, my voice cold and unwavering, and you blew it. Now it's time to face the consequences. As if on cue, the doorbell rang, and I felt a surge of relief wash over me. Angela, my best friend and confidant, had arrived, not a moment too soon. I opened the door to find her standing there, a look of steely determination on her face. Without a word, she brushed past me and made her way towards Larry, who was still pleading his case. You heard the lady, Angela said, her voice leaving no room for argument. It's time for you to go. Larry's eyes widened as he took in her imposing presence. For a moment I thought he might try to argue, but one look from Angela seemed to drain him of his fight. Fine, he spat, his voice dripping with bitterness. But this isn't over, June. Not by a long shot. With that, he gathered up the boxes and bags, shooting me one last venomous glare before storming out the door and slamming it behind him. As the echoes of his departure faded, I felt myself sag against the wall, the weight of the past few hours finally catching up to me. Angela was at my side in an instant, her arms wrapped around me in a comforting embrace. It's okay, she murmured, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. You did the right thing. He's gone, and you're free. And in that moment, as I clung to my friend, I knew she was right. The battle had been won, and the war was finally over. Larry was gone, banished from my life, and I could finally begin to heal. Revenge, it seemed, was a dish best served piping hot. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional upheaval, but through it all, I remained steadfast in my resolve. Larry thought he could walk away scot-free, but he had another thing coming. With the help of a tenacious lawyer, I went after him for everything he had, alimony, assets, you name it. And in the end, my perseverance paid off. The judge saw right through Larry's lies and awarded me a hefty settlement, one that would ensure I could start my new life on solid financial footing. But the true victory, the sweetest revenge, came in the form of Kara's downfall. Karma, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. It all started when Kara's new boyfriend, some poor schmuck she had sunk her claws into, caught wind of her sordid affair with Larry. Needless to say, he was less than thrilled about being played for a fool. You lying, deceitful snake, he shouted, his voice carrying across the restaurant where they had been having a romantic dinner. How could you do this to me? Kara, for all her manipulative ways, was clearly caught off guard. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, unable to conjure up one of her trademark excuses. I can explain, she stammered, her eyes darting around the room in panic. But her boyfriend wasn't having any of it. With a shake of his head, he pushed away from the table and stormed out, leaving Kara to face the scrutiny of the other diners alone. As word of her betrayal spread through our social circles, Kara found herself increasingly ostracized. Friends who had once fawned over her suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. Even her own family seemed to turn their backs, ashamed of her actions. And through it all, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. Payback, it seemed, was a dish best served ice cold. As for me, I was slowly but surely piecing my life back together. With Angela's unwavering support, I had moved into her spare bedroom, using it as a temporary home base while I figured out my next steps. It was during those long nights, huddled together on the couch with a bottle of wine and endless episodes of trashy reality TV, that the idea began to take shape. A business, one that would help other women like me, women who had been betrayed, belittled, and beaten down by the men in their lives. With Angela's encouragement, I took the leap, pouring my savings and settlement money into launching a boutique consulting firm. Our mission? To empower women, to help them find their strength and reclaim their lives after heartbreak and betrayal. It was a risky move, but one that paid off in spades. Word of our services spread like wildfire, and before long we had a thriving client base of women from all walks of life, each one seeking the same thing: revenge. And as I sat in my sunny office, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of a successful business, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I had taken the ultimate revenge on Larry and Kara. I had built a life for myself, one that was infinitely better than anything they could have ever offered me. As for them, well, let's just say that karma has a way of evening the score. And in the end, it was me who emerged victorious, with a newfound strength and resilience that no one could ever take away. Revenge, it seemed, was a dish best served with a side of empowerment and a heaping helping of success. "Kenzie, I've got this new app idea that's going to revolutionize everything," Jack declared, eyes glued to his phone. I laughed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Of course you do, Mr. Genius. Just don't forget to revolutionize our anniversary plans, too." Jack barely looked up. Yeah, sorry, just one sec, gotta reply to this email." As I watched him tap away, a twinge of unease crept in. Jack and I always celebrated our milestones grandly, and he was never this distracted before. I brushed off the thought, pushing the unease aside. Our lives were perfect. We had shared dreams, flourishing careers, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. Weeks passed, and Jack's absorption in his phone grew. He had become a fixture in his office late into the night. One evening, after returning from work, I found him still on his phone. "Dinner's ready," I called, setting the table. Jack mumbled something incoherent, still focused on his screen. I sighed, louder than intended. He finally looked up, offering a weak smile. "Just finishing up some work stuff." "More emails?" I couldn't hide the sarcasm in my voice. Jack sighed. "Kenzie, it's complicated. Just trust me." "Trust you?" "That's the thing, Jack. It's hard to trust someone who's always hiding behind a screen." He stood up, approaching the table. "I'm not hiding anything. Work's just demanding right now. We'll celebrate once things calm down." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Something felt off, an undercurrent of tension I couldn't ignore. Another late night. I woke to an empty bed, Jack nowhere in sight. I tiptoed down the stairs, peeking into his home office. There he was, whispering into his phone. "Jack, it's almost midnight," I interrupted. He jumped, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Go back to sleep, Kenzie." Now my curiosity was piqued. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a client from another time zone. You know how it is." His tone was defensive, making my suspicion grow stronger. I crossed my arms. "Do I?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're overthinking this, Kenzie. Go to bed." Reluctantly I did, but the seeds of doubt were firmly planted. The next morning at breakfast, Jack barely touched his food. "Busy day?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah. Got a big project in the works. Sorry if I seem distant." The apology was half-hearted. "Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway," I suggested. "Could do us some good." He nodded absent-mindedly. "Sure, sounds nice." But his lack of enthusiasm was evident. Our seemingly perfect life was beginning to show cracks, and a gnawing feeling in my gut told me things were about to get worse. I decided to talk to Mia, my best friend, at lunch later that day. If anyone could offer perspective, it was her. Yet a part of me already knew I wasn't overthinking. The perfect illusion was crumbling, and buried beneath it lay truths that would soon unravel our lives. I met Mia at our usual lunch spot, a cozy cafe downtown. We ordered our usual chicken salad for me and a turkey club for her. As comfortable as our routine was, an uncomfortable feeling loomed over me. "Everything okay, Kens?" Mia asked, taking a sip of her iced tea. "Jack's been acting strange. He's always on his phone, working late. It doesn't feel right." Mia gave me a sympathetic look. Maybe it's just work stress. You know how demanding tech can be. Maybe, I replied, though I wasn't convinced. Just then, my eyes caught a familiar figure outside the cafe window. Jack. He was standing close to a young woman, laughing, his arm around her waist. My heart sank. Mia, I said sharply, interrupting her mid-sentence. Look. She turned to follow my gaze and gasped. Is that... Jack, I confirmed softly, and he's not alone. We both watched as Jack leaned in to kiss the woman. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a work thing. It was something far more painful. Mia shook her head in disbelief. Kenzie, I'm so sorry. I stood abruptly, determined to confront him. Mia grabbed my arm. No, not here. Wait till you have him alone. Chomping down my initial impulse, I nodded. You're right, but that, I pointed out the window, isn't just anyone. That's Paige. Her eyes widened. My daughter, Paige? No way. She's only 24. What the hell is going on? I wish I knew, I said through gritted teeth. I'll find out tonight. Dinner was a silent affair, tension hanging like a storm cloud. Jack poked at his food, clearly distracted. Who was she? I finally blurted out. Jack looked up, feigning confusion. Who? Don't who me. Paige, I saw you with her today. His face hardened. Kenzie, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Jack pushed his chair back and stood up. Fine. You want the truth? Paige and I are seeing each other. It felt like the floor dropped from beneath me. You're seeing my best friend's daughter? How could you? I'm tired of this life, Jack snapped. I need something new, something exciting. Paige gives me that. I could barely breathe. So you destroy our life for what? A fling? It's more than a fling, he said coldly. I'm done pretending. I stood there, staring at a man I no longer recognized. The silence grew heavy until Jack muttered, I'm staying with Paige tonight. He walked out, leaving me in the ruins of our perfect life. The door slammed, and I broke down by feeling the sting of betrayal cut deep. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger tangled up with a girl half his age. This wasn't just an end. It was a beginning. The beginning of understanding just how deep this betrayal cut and where it would lead me next. I dialed my mother, Evelyn, the next morning, desperate for some sense of clarity. As soon as she picked up, I could barely keep the tears from spilling. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Her voice was firm yet concerned. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she arrived, I could see the worry etched on her face. Kenzie, what's going on? Jack's having an affair, I replied, trying to steady my voice. With Paige. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. Paige? Mia's daughter? Yes, and he admitted he's leaving me for her. As if on cue, Mia called me. Kenzie, I heard everything. I'm coming over. We need to talk about this face to face. We all gathered in my living room. The tension was palpable. Mia was the first to break the silence. I never thought Paige could do something like this. She's my daughter. How could she betray you, betray us like this? It gets worse, I said. Jack's leaving me for her. He's tired of our life. Evelyn shook her head. Her usual calm rattled. We need to confront them. This can't go on. Before I could respond, the door opened, and in walked Jack and Paige, hand in hand. The audacity of it took my breath away. Well, looks like the party started without us, Paige sneered. How dare you? Mia shouted, stepping forward. You betrayed your own family. Paige shrugged, unfazed. It's not my fault you all are so boring. Jack wants excitement, and I can give him that. Jack stood there, silent but resolute. His presence was like a wall, indifferent and cold. Evelyn, Mia pleaded, say something, please. My mother took a deep breath. Paige, you've always been conniving, but this... I never thought you would stoop so low to destroy your own family. Paige rolled her eyes. Spare me the lecture, Grandma. This isn't about family. It's about what I want, and I'm getting it. You're tearing everything apart, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack finally spoke. We're not tearing anything apart that wasn't already broken. I'm done living a lie. So this is it? I asked, desperation clinging to my words. You're choosing this over us? That's right. Paige answered for him, pulling Jack closer. Get used to it. Evelyn stepped forward then. Paige, you're living off a trust fund that's about to run out. What happens when you're broke? Shock rippled across Paige's face, though she quickly masked it. We'll manage, right, Jack? Jack hesitated, the first sign of doubt crossing his face. Think long and hard, Jack, Evelyn continued. Is this really what you want? Jack's silence was deafening. The the realization hitting him for the first time. As they turned to leave, the sense of finality settled in. But amidst the heartbreak, there was a small flicker of hope. It was the beginning of a plan, a way to regain control and ensure they would come to regret every single decision they had made. Evelyn and Mia stayed late into the evening, offering support and helping me regain some composure. The reality of my situation made it almost impossible to think clearly. "Kenzie, you need to focus on yourself now," Evelyn said firmly, "and figure out your next move." "I will, but I can't just let them get away with this," I replied, the anger in my voice unmistakable. Mia nodded. "We've got to hit them where it hurts. Paige's trust fund is almost gone, and Jack doesn't know that yet." The thought was sobering. I smiled slightly, a plan beginning to form. That's a start, and they'll be penniless soon. Over the next few days, I focused on my job, pouring all my energy into my work. Success would be my revenge. The drive to succeed, combined with the desire for payback, propelled me forward. Each day, the path became clearer. One evening, I needed to relive some of the tension, so I met up with Zoe, my closest friend since college, who worked as a private investigator. If anyone could help dig in deeper, it was her. "Zoe, I need your help," I said as we sat down in her office. She took a sip from her coffee and leaned forward. "Give me the details." "Jack's been cheating on me with Paige, Mia's daughter," I explained quickly. Zoe's brow furrowed. "That's messy. What do you want me to do?" "I need anything and everything you can find. Financials, secrets, there has to be something," I said resolutely. "You got it," Zoe replied, grabbing a notepad. "I'll get started right away." As Zoe began her investigation, I kept moving ahead. I filed for divorce and focused on climbing the ranks at work. Every success was a small victory, a step towards reclaiming my life. A few days later, Zoe called me. "Kenzie, I've got something. Meet me at the cafe." When I arrived, Zoe had a folder ready. "Jack's financials are tied up in risky investments, and Paige isn't as squeaky clean as she appears. She's run up a lot of debt, and without that trust fund, she's toast." I felt a grim satisfaction. "So they'll hit rock bottom soon." "Seems like it," Zoe confirmed. "They'll tear each other apart once the money runs dry." At home, I organized the documents and reports Zoe had given me. I would use every bit of this information to ensure they faced the consequences of their actions. Meanwhile, Jack and Paige's relationship started to deteriorate. The financial strain was taking its toll. I heard rumors of their arguments, and it was like a small beacon of justice. Each day, I grew closer to my goal. I could sense their downfall approaching. I would be there, ready to watch it unfold, a fitting end for their betrayal. I knew the time for a dramatic confrontation was nearing, and I was more prepared than ever to face it. The morning after filing for divorce, I felt a strange sense of liberation. It was like I'd cut away the final tether holding me to a life that no longer existed. Jack's reaction had been predictably indifferent when he received the papers. "Are you serious, Kenzie?" he'd said, briefly looking up from his phone. "Is this really necessary?" "You made it necessary. This is the consequence of your choices," I responded, my voice steady. He shook his head, scoffing as he walked away. His reluctance to acknowledge the gravity of the situation only fueled my resolve. Back in my office, I called Zoe. "Can you meet for lunch? I have an idea." At the cafe, we discussed ways to use the information she'd gathered. "Jack's partners need to know about his shady financials," Zoe suggested. "And Paige's debt. Let's start a little fire and watch it burn," I added. Zoe smirked. "I like the way you think." Over the next few weeks, block by block, I built my case. I discreetly provided Jack's partners with evidence of his risky investments. They started distancing themselves, and whispers of mismanagement circulated. Jack was too absorbed in his downward spiral with Paige to notice the backlash coming from his associates. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work. Late nights and hard-fought achievements raised my profile within the company. It wasn't just revenge, it was also about rebuilding my life, on my terms. One evening, on a whim, I called Jack. "We need to talk." He sounded suspicious. "About what?" "Meet me at our usual spot, the coffee shop," I said and hung up before he could protest. When he arrived, he looked worn out, shadows under his eyes. "So what's this about? How are things with Paige?" I kept my tone neutral. Jack sighed. "It's complicated. Her trust fund, it's running out soon, isn't it?" His eyes widened. "You know about that?" Of course I do, and the debt she's accumulated. I leaned in. Jack, you left our stable life for this mess. Does she even know? Since when do you care? He retorted, frowning. I don't. I just want you to face the reality you've created, I said, standing up. Good luck with that. Leaving him there, stunned, felt like a small victory. This was far from over. A few days later, Zoe called me, excitement in her voice. Kenzie, I've got something big. Meet me at my office. When I arrived, she handed me another folder. More dirt on Paige. She's been stealing from Jack's business account to pay her debts. I couldn't help but smile. This is exactly what I needed. Ready to pull the trigger? Zoe asked, eyes gleaming. Absolutely, I replied. Let's finish this. I returned home, preparing for the final stage. Jack and Paige were on the brink of ruin, and I was ready to give them the final push. Revenge was no longer just a desire. It was a certainty. And soon, they would face the full consequences of their betrayals. It wasn't long before Jack's world began to crumble. At first, I heard whispers at work about a big fallout between him and several investors. They were pulling out, leaving his latest project hanging by a thread. All the while I watched from a safe distance, quietly relishing each piece of news that slid my way. One night I was working late when my phone buzzed. It was Zoe. You need to hear this, Kenzie. Jack just found out about Paige's secret debts. He is livid. Where are they? I asked, curiosity piqued. They're holed up at their apartment. From what I've heard, things are getting heated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, a stronger part, needed to see the fallout firsthand. I grabbed my coat and drove to their place, staying out of sight but close enough to hear the raised voices echoing through the night. Paige, what the hell? You spent how much? Jack's voice was loud and filled with accusation. Paige fired back, equally loud. Don't act like you're blameless. Your whole company is falling apart because of your bad decisions. Their words cut through the darkness, filled with venom. After a moment, there was a loud crash. Furniture, or maybe a thrown object. Jack burst out of the door, looking wild-eyed and frantic. I ducked behind a car, holding my breath. Jack, come back here! We're not done! Paige screamed from the doorway. Done? We're done when I say we're done! Jack shouted back, his voice echoing down the empty street. He got into his car and drove off, tires screeching. I followed at a safe distance, curiosity driving me forward. He arrived at my house, of all places. I stayed back, watching with a mix of satisfaction and curiosity as he banged on my door loudly. I waited a moment before stepping into the light. Kenzie, please, I need to talk to you, he begged as I approached. What is it, Jack? I asked, my voice calm. I can't go back there. It's a disaster. Everything's falling apart, he admitted, looking desperate. I warned you about this, I said, keeping my voice steady. I know you did, he said, tears forming in his eyes. I made a mistake. Please help me. I stared at him for a long moment, feeling a mixture of pity and triumph. I can't help you. You chose this path. Kenzie, please. He grabbed my arm, but I stepped back, pulling out my phone. I think it's time I call the police. You're not thinking rationally. Jack's eyes widened, panic setting in. No, I'm leaving. Just as he turned to go, Paige appeared, wild-eyed and holding something metallic in her hand. You're not going anywhere, Jack. I quickly dialed 911, explaining the situation as Paige assaulted Jack with a barrage of accusations. Moments later, the police arrived, diffusing the situation and taking Paige away. As the chaos finally settled, I watched Jack being led away in handcuffs. The public exposure, the scandal, it was all over the news by morning. My mother, Evelyn, and I shared a quiet moment, sipping coffee and taking in the headlines. Justice had been served, and I felt a profound sense of closure washing over me. The morning after the chaotic scene at my house, I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications. News of Jack and Paige's tumultuous fallout had spread like wildfire. Headlines splashed their scandal across every platform. My inbox was flooded with messages from colleagues, friends, even acquaintances who hadn't contacted me in years. Each message was a reminder that the truth had finally surfaced. As I sipped my coffee, my phone rang again. It was Zoe. Did you see the news? I have. Couldn't happen to a nicer couple, right? I replied, unable to hide my satisfaction. Reports say Paige has been arrested and Jack's been detained for questioning. The whole thing looks bad for them. Good, I said simply. They deserve every bit of it. A knock on the door interrupted our call. Hey, I have to go. Someone's at the door. Opening the door, I found myself face to face with two police officers. Mackenzie Reed? The taller officer asked. Yes, that's me, I replied, heart pounding. We're here in relation to the incident last night. We need to ask you a few questions. I stepped aside to let them in, memories of the chaos replaying in my mind. They asked about Jack's arrival, Paige's outburst, and my call to the police. I answered truthfully, every word bringing a strange sense of finality. After 30 minutes, they nodded and thanked me for my time. The investigation will proceed, one officer said. Jack and Paige will both face various charges. If you need any assistance, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, officers, I said as they left, closing the door and exhaling deeply. Evelyn joined me in the kitchen, having overheard the conversation. Looks like they're finally facing the consequences, she remarked, her voice steady. It's about time, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The days that followed were surreal. Jack's professional life crumbled as investors and partners distanced themselves from the scandal. His misconduct became public knowledge, and the cracks in his pristine image grew deeper. At work, I was met with sympathetic glances and hushed conversations. Yet, I remained focused, using the chaos to fuel my determination. A week later, the police called again. Jack was officially charged with embezzlement, and Paige was facing multiple counts of fraud and assault. As I hung up the phone, a sense of closure settled over me. That evening, Evelyn and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. It's finally over, I said, feeling the release of tension. Yes, it is, she agreed, and you handled it all with incredible strength. As we sat in comfortable silence, a figure approached. It was Zoe, carrying a bottle of wine. Thought this called for a celebration, she said, smiling. Absolutely, I replied, grateful for my friends and family who stood by me. We toasted to new beginnings, the future bright and filled with possibilities. The nightmare was behind me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked forward with hope. Jack and Paige had met their reckoning, and I had emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. The aftermath of Jack and Paige's downfall brought a strange calm to my life. It felt like everything that once weighed me down had been lifted. My focus shifted entirely to my career, and the rewards quickly followed. Promotions, recognition, everything started to fall into place. One afternoon, I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with a message from Mia. Let's catch up. Need to talk. We met at the same cafe where my suspicions had first been confirmed. Mia looked visibly drained but determined. Kenzie, thank you for everything. You handled this whole mess with such grace. I smiled, sipping my coffee. I couldn't have done it without you and Zoe. How's Paige? Her hearing is next month. She's been cut off and has to face the consequences alone, Mia said, sadness and resolution mixing in her voice. She made her choices, I replied softly. As the weeks turned into months, the legal proceedings took their toll on Jack and Paige. Jack made a few feeble attempts to contact me, but I blocked all his efforts. He was a chapter I was done reading, and I had no intention of going back. One evening, while working late again, a colleague, Mark Adams, knocked on my office door. Still here, Kenzie? Yeah, just wrapping things up. How about you? Same. Listen, I was thinking of grabbing a coffee. Care to join? There was something comforting about Mark. Reliable, kind, genuine. Sure, I could use a break. We walked to a nearby coffee shop, chatting about work, life, and everything in between. Mark's presence was a welcome change, a reminder that not all was tainted by my previous ordeal. Days turned into weeks, and our coffee breaks became more frequent. Mark's support was unwavering, or a stark contrast to the deception I'd endured. One evening, as we walked back to the office, he stopped and turned to me. Kenzie, would you consider maybe dinner this weekend? It caught me off guard, but in a good way. I smiled. I'd like that, Mark. I'd like that a lot. Our dinner date was a turning point. Conversation flowed easily, laughter came naturally, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. Mark was different, steady, caring, and supportive in a way that Jack had never been. Months passed, and as my relationship with Mark blossomed, I finally felt the scars from Jack and Paige's betrayal start to heal. Closure wasn't a single moment, but a series of small victories, of new memories replacing old wounds. One evening, as Mark and I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to me. Kenzie, I want you to know I'm here for the long haul. No games, no lies. I looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity. Thank you, Mark, that means more than you know. As the stars blinked into existence, I realized my life had come full circle. The chapters of betrayal and revenge were closed, replaced by hope and a genuine connection. With Mark by my side, I was ready to embrace the future, knowing that this time it was built on trust and mutual respect. Ellie, if you can't keep it together, maybe you shouldn't come home at all. The words echoed in my mind as I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen. The phone call from Officer Daniels still reverberated through my head, dulling my senses. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Parker, but there's been an accident. Your parents, they didn't survive. I hung up, choking on my tears. My parents, on their way to the Grand Canyon for their annual road trip, gone in an instant. I fumbled for my phone, dialing my husband, Mike. Mike, I need you. My parents. My voice cracked. Ellie, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can't this wait? Mike's irritation pierced through the line. They're dead, Mike. My parents are dead. I sobbed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Silence. Then with a sigh, Ellie, if you can't keep it together, maybe you shouldn't come home at all. He hung up. Stunned, I dropped the phone. The hum of the office felt distant as I rushed out, barely noticing my colleagues' concerned glances. The drive home was a blur. When I arrived, Mike was already there, standing in the kitchen. Ellie, you're blowing this out of proportion, he said, barely looking up. My parents just died, I shouted. How can you be so cold? Look, it's not my fault. You need to handle this better. He snapped back, turning away to avoid my gaze. I retreated to our bedroom, tears streaming down my face. Memories of my parents flooded in. Thanksgivings, road trips, their laughter. Everything was shattered. I felt alone, misunderstood, even in my own home. Later that night, after putting our daughter Lizzie to bed, I approached Mike again. We need to talk about the funeral. I have a big project due. I might not make it, he said flatly, tapping on his laptop. Can't you see what I'm going through? My voice trembled, anger mixing with grief. Ellie, I'm tired. We'll talk tomorrow. And with that, he walked out, leaving me alone with my pain. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, heard their voices. By morning, I was numb. I typed out the obituary, made funeral arrangements, all while Lizzie asked why Grandma and Grandpa weren't coming back. I couldn't find the words to explain. Days passed, blending into a haze. The neighborhood sympathy offered little comfort. Everyone's questions, their pitying looks, made it worse, and Mike's indifference was a knife twisting deeper into my heart. The day of the funeral, I dressed Lizzie in her best dress. Why isn't Daddy coming? She asked quietly. He has work, sweetheart, I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady for her sake. At the funeral, standing beside the caskets, I felt utterly hollow. Friends and family offered condolences, but I barely registered their presence. Cheryl, Mike's mother, approached me with a look of forced sympathy. Such a tragedy, she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Have you thought about the inheritance? It might help with expenses. I stared at her, disbelief blending with fury. My parents just died. How can you talk about money? I'm just being practical, dear. Someone has to be, she replied, patting my shoulder in a mock display of comfort. Her words left me even more broken. Cheryl never cared about anyone but herself and her son. That night, I sat in the dark, my resolve hardening. My parents deserved justice, and I wouldn't let Mike's apathy or his mother's greed tarnish their memory. It was time to face the harsh reality of my life and take control. As the moonlight filtered through the window, I made a silent vow. Things would change. I would not let their deaths be in vain, and I would not remain trapped in this loveless, uncaring marriage any longer. The days leading up to the funeral were a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I spent every moment arranging services, choosing flowers, coordinating with the funeral home. Mike remained distant, claiming work obligations kept him busy. The weight of his indifference crushed me. One evening, I caught him slinking into the house late. Where were you? I demanded. Work. Had to stay late, he replied, avoiding eye contact. Late again? Every night this week, Mike? My voice cracked with frustration. Ellie, I told you, it's a big project, he snapped. He brushed past me and headed to our bedroom, closing the door behind him. I stood there feeling more alone than ever. The night before the funeral, Cheryl showed up unannounced. She breezed into the living room, her perfume overwhelming. "Ellie, how are you holding up?" she asked, her tone insincere. "Doing what I can," I replied, keeping my eyes on the carpet. Cheryl's gaze shifted to the closed bedroom door. "Where's Mike?" "Still working," I said through gritted teeth. "That man works too much," she tutted, then turned her attention back to me. "So have you decided what's happening with their estate?" I clenched my fists. "Cheryl, it's not the time." "Don't be so emotional, Ellie. This is about practicality," she said, her voice cool. "My parents are gone, Cheryl. I can't think about money right now," I replied, barely holding back tears. "Well, you need to. Mike and Lizzie need security," she continued, as if she wasn't intruding on my grief. "Mike and Lizzie are not my immediate concern," I snapped, standing my ground. She huffed, clearly displeased. "Fine, Ellie, but don't take too long. This is important for the family." As soon as she left, I collapsed onto the couch, the weight of everything suffocating me. Mike's absence, Cheryl's greed, the loss of my parents. It was too much. I needed to stay strong for Lizzie, but my resolve was slipping. The funeral day arrived, gray and somber. I dressed in black, every motion robotic. Lizzie clung to my side, sensing the gravity of the day, even if she didn't fully understand. As we approached the church, Mike's car was nowhere to be seen. He had promised to meet us there, but the empty space felt like a slap. Inside, the service began. The minister spoke kind words about my parents, but all I could think about was Mike's empty seat. When it was my turn to speak, I choked back tears just looking at the sea of sympathetic faces. Afterward, at the reception, Cheryl approached again. "You need to think about Lizzie's future," she said, cornering me by the refreshment table. "I'm trying to get through today," I said, my voice breaking. "Ellie, you're the mother now. You have responsibilities," she lectured, her eyes hard. "I'm well aware of my responsibilities, Cheryl," I replied sharply, barely containing my anger. Her face twisted in disapproval. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she muttered before walking away. Standing there, surrounded by people, yet utterly alone, something inside me hardened. Mike's coldness, Cheryl's incessant greed, these weren't just inconveniences. They were part of a larger problem, a toxic burden I didn't need to carry. I looked down at Lizzie, her innocent face looking up at me. For her sake, I knew I had to act. I couldn't rely on Mike or endure Cheryl's manipulation any longer. My parents' death had shattered my world. Now I had to rebuild it, stronger for both of us. It was time to make some changes, and I knew exactly where to start. As days turned into weeks after the funeral, I noticed Mike's absences becoming more frequent and his excuses thinner. Each late-night return chipped away at the fragile remnants of our marriage. One evening, while Lizzie was engrossed in her homework, I cornered him in the kitchen. "Where have you been, Mike?" I asked, my voice steady. "Work, Ellie." "I told you," he replied, avoiding eye contact as he rummaged through the fridge. "Work? Really?" I crossed my arms. "You smell like cheap perfume." He froze, then turned to face me, his expression hardening. "You're imagining things. Maybe you should get help." I scoffed, fury boiling up. "Don't turn this on me. I know something's going on." "You're paranoid," he snapped, grabbing a soda and slamming the fridge door shut. I watched him walk away, a decision forming in my mind. If he wouldn't come clean, I'd find out myself. I had to know the truth for my and Lizzie's sake. The next day I made a call to a private investigator. "Hello, Mr. Harris. I need to find out what my husband's up to," I explained, feeling a mix of desperation and resolve. Mr. Harris was efficient. Within a week he had gathered enough evidence to fill a small folder. We met in a nondescript cafe, him sliding the folder across the table. "You were right to suspect, Mrs. Parker. He's been seeing a woman named Kim Blackwood. She works at a local bar." My heart pounded as I flipped through the photographs. Mike with Kim, laughing, holding hands, even kissing in public. Betrayal stabbed at me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Thank you, Mr. Harris," I said, my voice steady. "I'll take it from here." That night, I confronted Mike when he finally showed up. "Care to explain these?" I tossed the folder onto the couch. His eyes widened as he saw the contents. "Ellie, I can explain," he stammered. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me? Cheating on me?" My voice rose with each word. "It's not what it looks like," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really? Because it looks like you've been with her for months," I shot back, my anger giving me strength. Work's been stressful, Ellie. You've been so distant. Don't you dare blame this on me. I interrupted, my body shaking with rage. You betrayed our family. You betrayed Lizzie. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. I want a divorce, Mike, and you're going to pay for what you've done. His face turned from guilt to anger. You think you can just take Lizzie away from me? I'll fight you on this. I have more than enough evidence. Any court would side with me, I said, standing tall. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about our daughter, and she deserves better. Mike stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, breathing heavily, the house silent except for the ticking of the clock. Lizzie was asleep upstairs, unaware of the storm that had just erupted. The next morning, I began gathering more evidence, financial records, text messages, anything that would secure my case. Each piece of proof was another step toward freeing myself and protecting Lizzie. I contacted a lawyer, determined to proceed strategically. We have a strong case, the lawyer assured me. With the evidence you've provided, we can ensure full custody and a hefty alimony. Your husband won't stand a chance. Hearing those words bolstered my resolve. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming my life and safeguarding Lizzie's future. I was ready to fight, and I wouldn't back down until justice was served. I sat in the lawyer's office, the divorce papers in front of me. My hands felt steady as I signed each page. My attorney, Mrs. Grant, gave a nod of approval. We've got a strong case, Ellie. Present these to Mike and he'll realize he can't win. Leaving the office, I felt a strange mix of determination and dread. I drove straight home, needing to confront Mike immediately, armed with the legal documents and unshakable resolve. He was sitting on the couch, watching TV, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing. Mike, we need to talk, I said, standing in front of him, blocking the screen. He looked up, irritated. What now, Ellie? I tossed the papers onto his lap. These. Sign them. He glanced at them, his face slowly turning red as he realized what they were. Divorce papers? You've got to be kidding me. He stood up, towering over me. I'm done, Mike. I want out. And I'm taking Lizzie with me, I replied, not backing down. His face twisted in anger. You think you can just walk away and take my daughter? I'll fight this. I'll ruin you, Ellie. You'll never get custody. I've got plenty of evidence to prove you're unfit, I shot back. Your affair, your neglect, I'll make sure the court sees it all. He laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You really think you can beat me? I'll drag you through the mud. I'll make sure everyone knows you're the unstable one. You won't have a leg to stand on. Do what you want, Mike. I'm not backing down. Lizzie deserves better than this toxic environment. You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing without me, Ellie, he sneered. I felt a surge of anger. I'm stronger than you think, and I'll prove it. Sign the papers, Mike, or I'll see you in court. For a moment we stood there, glaring at each other. Finally, he snatched the papers and threw them to the ground. This isn't over, Ellie. Not by a long shot. I picked up the papers, my resolve strengthened by his threats. We'll see about that. Over the next week, Mike's threats became more intense. He called me at all hours, leaving angry voicemails. He showed up at my job, trying to cause scenes, but my coworkers helped keep him at bay. It was exhausting, but I refused to let him see me falter. One evening, I heard him on the phone with his mother. She's trying to ruin me, Mom. I need to find a way to take Lizzie away from her. Cheryl's voice came through, sharp and manipulative. We'll fight this together, Mike. She won't stand a chance against us. I knew they'd stop at nothing to hurt me, to take Lizzie from me. But I wouldn't let them. I had the support of my lawyer, my friends, and my undeniable evidence. I had to be strong for Lizzie. I called Mrs. Grant. We need to proceed. His threats are escalating. We'll move quickly, she assured me. Stay strong, Ellie. We've got this. The next morning, Mike received an official notice to appear in court. His fury was evident as he stormed into the house, waving the papers. You think you can win this? Yes, I replied simply, because it's the truth. This is war, Ellie, he spat, throwing the papers at my feet. So be it, I said, standing firm. For Lizzie, for my parents' memory, and for myself, I would not back down. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. I sat at a small table in the corner of the cafe, my heart beating fast. I clutched the divorce papers in my hand, waiting for Mike to arrive. The sounds of steaming milk and clinking cups filled the air, but I was focused on the door. When Mike finally walked in, his eyes locked onto me with a look of sheer contempt. He sat down roughly, not bothering with pleasantries. "What do you want, Ellie?" "I want this over with." "You need to sign these," I said, pushing the papers towards him. He glanced at them, his jaw tightening. "I told you, I'm not signing anything. You think you can just waltz in here and dictate everything?" "You had your chance, Mike. Now it's about protecting Lizzie and moving on." He sneered. "You're delusional if you think you're getting any money from me. And Lizzie? Over my dead body." As he spoke, his boss Derek entered the cafe. Derek was heading to the counter when he recognized Mike and turned towards us, encouraged by visible intrigue. "Mike, what's going on here?" Derek asked, eyes shifting between us. Mike's face turned pale. "Nothing, sir. Just a family matter." "Looks like more than that," Derek said, his gaze narrowing at the sight of the papers on the table. "Ellie," Mike hissed, attempting to maintain his composure. "This isn't the place." I seized the moment. "Actually, it is. Mike, you've been lying and cheating for months. You've neglected your family and your job." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Is this true?" Mike stumbled over his words. "It's complicated. She's blowing things out of proportion." "No, Mike," I shot back. "You've been spending company time with your mistress, not on work projects." Derek's expression shifted from curiosity to cold anger. "Is this true, Mike? Sir, I can explain." Derek cut him off. "Save it. I've had my suspicions. Consider this your last day at the office." Mike's face turned red, his anger barely contained. "You can't do that." "I just did," Derek replied sharply, turning and walking away. I watched Mike crumble before me, his career crashing as he realized there was no escaping this time. The cafe's ambient noise returned, but we were in a bubble of silence. "You've ruined everything," Mike hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "No, Mike, you did that all by yourself," I said, standing up. "Mark my words, Ellie. I'm taking you down with me," he said through gritted teeth. "Good luck with that," I replied, picking up the papers. As I walked out, I felt a surge of liberation. This battle was far from over, but I'd just won a significant victory. Outside the cafe, I took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. Mike's downfall had begun, and I was ready to fight for our daughter's future. Every step I took away from that confrontation was another step towards justice, for my parents, for Lizzie, and most importantly, for myself. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as I walked in, head held high. Mrs. Grant was beside me, a reassuring presence. Mike sat across the room, his face a mask of anger and defiance. His lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, whispered something into his ear. The judge called for silence. "We're here today to consider custody and alimony arrangements for the Parker case," the judge announced. Mrs. Grant stood addressing the court. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence of Mr. Parker's infidelity and neglect, both as a husband and father. We request full custody for my client, Mrs. Parker, and appropriate alimony and child support." Mr. Jacobs rose, looking smug. "Your Honor, Mr. Parker disputes these accusations. He has been a dedicated father and deserves joint custody at the very least." The judge nodded, flipping through the files. "Mrs. Parker, please step forward." I straightened my back as I approached the stand. "Can you describe your husband's involvement with your daughter, Lizzie?" "Mike has been absent, that both physically and emotionally," I began. "He's focused on his affair and neglected his responsibilities at home. Lizzie needs stability, which I can provide." Mrs. Grant then presented the evidence. Photos, text messages, financial records, all condemning Mike. I saw his face redden as each piece of evidence was displayed. The judge looked over the documents carefully. "It seems clear that Mr. Parker has been preoccupied with his affair," he said, turning to Mike. "Do you have anything to say?" Mike stood, his body rigid. "Your Honor, this is all blown out of proportion. I've provided for my family. Ellie's just trying to ruin me." Mrs. Grant interjected. "Your Honor, Lizzie's well-being is our priority. Mr. Parker's actions have shown he's incapable of being a responsible parent." At that moment, the courtroom doors creaked open and a man walked in. It was Kim's husband, Dave. He approached the judge, holding a stack of papers. "Your Honor, if I may," Dave said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I, too, have evidence against Mr. Parker and my wife, Kim. Mr. Parker's actions have not only hurt his family, but mine as well." The judge allowed him to submit the documents. Dave outlined how their affair had affected his family, detailing financial discrepancies and deceit. The courtroom listened intently, the atmosphere thick with tension. After a thorough review, the judge spoke. Mr. Parker, given the overwhelming evidence, I rule in favor of Mrs. Parker. She is granted full custody of Lizzie and significant alimony and child support. Mike's face registered defeat. This isn't fair, he muttered under his breath. The judge continued. Furthermore, these financial records suggest potential fraud. This will be investigated separately. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. As the proceedings concluded, Mike shot me a venomous look. This isn't over, Ellie. I met his gaze, unflinching. Yes, it is, Mike. Yes, it is. Outside the courtroom, Dave approached me. I'm sorry for everything. Let's make sure they pay for what they've done. Agreed, I said, feeling a sense of camaraderie. As I walked to my car, I called Mrs. Grant. Thank you for everything. What's next? We'll finalize the paperwork, and then we'll look into those hidden accounts your investigator found, she replied. I nodded, determination burning within me. This battle was almost won, but the war wasn't over. Mike's deceit would lead to his downfall, and I was prepared for the next fight. With Lizzie by my side, there was nothing that could break me now. The knock on my door was sharp and insistent. I opened it to find a stern-faced detective holding a warrant. Mrs. Parker, may we come in? I stepped aside, heart pounding. What is this about? The detective nodded to his partner. We're here to search for documents related to Mr. Parker's offshore accounts. We have reason to believe he's been hiding assets. My mind raced. Mike had lied and cheated, and now his financial deceit was coming to light. Take whatever you need, I said, leading them to Mike's old office. While the detectives sifted through papers, I called Mrs. Grant. They're searching the house for evidence of Mike's hidden accounts. Good, she replied. This will only strengthen our case. Stay calm and cooperate. As the detectives worked, I found myself outside, watching Lizzie play in the yard with our neighbor's children. She looked so carefree, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. Hours passed before the detective reappeared. We've found enough to initiate a full investigation. Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Parker. You'll be hearing from us soon. After they left, I was overwhelmed with a mix of relief and anticipation. This was another nail in Mike's coffin, another step toward justice. The next morning, I received a call from Derek. Ellie, I wanted you to hear it from me. Mike's been arrested for fraud. The company's pressing charges. I closed my eyes, absorbing the news. Thank you for letting me know, Derek. This was inevitable, he sighed. He crossed too many lines. Take care, Ellie. Mike's arrest unleashed a media frenzy. Cameras and reporters swarmed our neighborhood, seeking a statement. I kept a low profile, focusing on Lizzie and the life we were rebuilding. One evening, as I tucked Lizzie into bed, she looked up at me with wide eyes. Mommy, is Daddy coming home? I brushed her hair gently. Not for a while, sweetheart, but you have me, and that's all we need right now. She nodded, trusting and innocent. Okay, Mommy, I love you. I love you too, Lizzie, I whispered, feeling the weight of my promise. I had to stay strong for her. Days turned into weeks. Mike's world continued to unravel. His assets were frozen, his accounts scrutinized. Cheryl tried to intervene, but her attempts were futile against the mounting evidence. I received a call from Kim one afternoon. Ellie, it's Kim. Can we talk? I hesitated, but curiosity and a need for closure prompted me. Fine, come over. When she arrived, she looked worn. I'm sorry for everything, she began, her voice shaky. I didn't realize the extent of Mike's lies. He's ruined my life, too. I studied her, seeing the guilt and regret. So what do you want from me? I just wanted to apologize and offer my support. What he did to both of us is unforgivable. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of solidarity with her. Thank you, Kim, but Mike's actions have consequences, and we both have to live with that. As she left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Closure was coming, slowly but surely. Weeks later, the court verdict was in. Mike was found guilty of fraud and embezzlement. He faced years in prison, his reputation shattered, his life in ruins. Cheryl's health declined rapidly, and she moved into a care facility. Mike's network of lies had collapsed entirely. One afternoon, as Lizzie and I were playing in the yard, the sun shining brightly, I realized we had reached a turning point. Mommy, are we okay now? Lizzie asked, her innocence refreshing. We are, Lizzie. We're better than okay, I said, scooping her into my arms. This is our fresh start. She giggled, her laughter a sweet balm to my weary soul. For the first time in a long while, I felt the stirrings of hope. Our future was bright, untouched by the shadows of the past. Mike's downfall was complete, and in its wake we would rebuild, stronger than ever. The move to California was hectic but liberating. Lizzie and I left the shadows of our old life behind, embracing a fresh start. Our new home, a cozy bungalow bathed in sunshine, felt like hope personified. On the first day at her new school, Lizzie was nervous. "Do you think they'll like me, Mom?" I knelt to her level, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "They'll love you, Lizzie. Just be yourself." We walked into the school together, the hallways bustling with students. Mrs. Thompson, Lizzie's teacher, greeted us warmly. "We're so happy to have Lizzie join us." I watched Lizzie blend into her new classroom, her face lighting up with curiosity and excitement. I left, feeling lighter, hopeful for the first time in a long while. At my new job, the environment was invigorating. I dove into projects, the creativity and challenge renewing my spirit. My coworkers were friendly, and Jack, the head of our team, was especially kind. One afternoon, Jack invited me to lunch. We walked to a nearby cafe, the air filled with the scent of fresh coffee and pastries. "So how are you settling in?" Jack asked, his eyes warm and inviting. "Better than I expected. It's been a rocky year, but I feel like we're finally finding our footing," I replied. Jack nodded, his expression understanding. "New beginnings can be tough, but you seem strong. Lizzie's lucky to have you." "Thanks, Jack. It means a lot," I said, feeling a connection growing. Days turned into weeks. Lizzie thrived at school, making friends and excelling in her classes. Her laughter filled our home, a sweet reminder of our resilience. I found myself looking forward to work, where Jack's presence became a comforting constant. One Friday evening, Jack invited us over for a barbecue. "Bring Lizzie. It'll be fun," he said with a smile. At Jack's house, Lizzie played in the yard with his dog, her laughter echoing through the air. Jack and I stood by the grill, the smell of sizzling burgers making me feel at home. "You've created such a warm place here," I remarked, watching Lizzie chase the dog. "It's important to have a sanctuary," Jack replied, his tone sincere. "Everyone needs a safe place to heal." We sat on the patio, the evening turning cool. Jack turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "Ellie, I've seen the strength it's taken to get where you are. You're incredible." I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. "It's been a journey, but I couldn't let Mike's actions define us." "He doesn't deserve a second thought," Jack said firmly. "You and Lizzie deserve all the happiness in the world." As the night wrapped around us, I realized how much I had healed. Jack's kindness, Lizzie's laughter, our new life, it was more than I had hoped for. A few weeks later, as Lizzie and I walked along the beach, hand in hand, she looked up at me. "Mommy, do you think Daddy is sorry for what he did?" I paused, looking at the horizon. "Maybe. But what matters now is that we're happy. We're free to be ourselves." She nodded, her eyes bright. "I love our new life." "Me too, Lizzie," I said, squeezing her hand. "Me too." The sun set, casting a golden glow over the waves. I felt a deep sense of peace. Our past was behind us, replaced by a future filled with promise. Mike's deceit and cruelty no longer dictated our lives. We were free, resilient, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The journey had been long and painful, but it led us to this moment of pure, unadulterated happiness. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. "Isn't marriage about time together, Hudson? Or does your new promotion mean our vows expire at midnight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing unease in my stomach. Hudson glanced up from his laptop, his brow furrowed. "Carice, you know it's just a busy period at work. This promotion is a big deal, and I need to prove myself." "By neglecting your wife?" I countered, feeling the sting of his absence more acutely with each passing day. "We barely see each other anymore, and when we do, you're glued to that screen." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm sorry, honey. It won't be like this forever. Once I get through this initial phase, things will settle down. I promise." I wanted to believe him, but the nagging doubts persisted. Hudson had always been ambitious, but his recent detachment felt different, more pronounced. A part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something else was at play. "All right," I conceded, forcing a small smile. "But don't forget about us, okay? We're supposed to be a team." He reached out and squeezed my hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through me. "You're right. I'll make it up to you. I swear." As I gazed into his eyes, searching for the reassurance I craved, a flicker of uncertainty remained. Was I overthinking things, or was my husband slowly slipping away, consumed by forces beyond my comprehension? The next evening, I found myself at one of Hudson's company parties, surrounded by the usual suspects, colleagues, investors, and their respective partners. I plastered on a smile, making small talk while scanning the room for Hudson. That's when I overheard a hushed conversation between two women I recognized from previous events. "Did you hear about Hudson's little rendezvous with Janine? Apparently, they've been getting cozy lately." My heart skipped a beat as the implications sank in. Janine was one of Hudson's direct reports, a young, ambitious woman always eager to please. "You're kidding," the other woman gasped. "But what about his wife?" The first woman shrugged. "I guess the thrill of the promotion was too much to resist." My world tilted on its axis as their words burrowed deep, fueling a suspicion I had desperately tried to ignore. Was Hudson really capable of such betrayal? In that moment, I knew I couldn't blindly trust his reassurances any longer. If there was truth to the rumors, I needed to uncover it, no matter how painful the revelations might be. After the party, I found myself unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had taken root. The rumor about Hudson's potential infidelity gnawed at me, breeding doubts that threatened to consume my every waking thought. I needed answers, but confronting Hudson directly could backfire spectacularly if my fears proved unfounded. No, I needed a more discreet approach, someone on the inside who could shed light on the situation without arousing suspicion. That's when I remembered Olivia, an old friend from college who had landed a job at the same tech firm a few years back. We hadn't spoken much lately, our lives having drifted apart, but perhaps she could provide the insight I so desperately craved. I sent her a casual text, suggesting we catch up over coffee, and to my relief, she eagerly agreed. A few days later, we found ourselves seated at a cozy cafe reminiscing about old times. "It's been too long," Olivia remarked, sipping her latte. "How have you been? How's Hudson?" I forced a smile, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been concerned lately." Olivia's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Taking a deep breath, I recounted the rumors I'd overheard at the party, my voice wavering ever so slightly. "There were whispers about Hudson being involved with someone named Janine. Do you know anything about that?" Olivia's eyes widened, and she glanced around furtively before leaning in closer. "Carice, I'm so sorry, but those rumors, they might have some truth to them." My heart sank as her words washed over me, confirming my worst fears. "What do you know?" I pressed, needing every detail, no matter how excruciating. "Janine and Hudson have been spending a lot of time together lately, working late nights and attending client meetings alone," Olivia explained, her voice laced with sympathy. "People have seen them getting a little too close for comfort, if you know what I mean." I nodded, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill forth. "And his promotion? Was any of that earned legitimately?" Olivia hesitated, her expression grave. "From what I've heard, he may have cut some corners, played a few underhanded games to get ahead, but I don't know all the details." In that moment, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me, fueled by the realization that the man I had devoted myself to was capable of such deceit. Hudson had not only broken our sacred vows, but had also compromised his integrity for personal gain. "Thank you for being honest with me," I managed, my voice trembling. I need to process all this." Olivia reached across the table, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "I'm here for you, Carice. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back." As I left the cafe, my mind whirled with a torrent of emotions: disbelief, rage, and a burning desire for retribution. Hudson had shattered the trust that formed the bedrock of our marriage, and for that, he would face consequences. I knew then that I couldn't simply confront him directly. He would undoubtedly deny everything and attempt to gaslight me. No, I needed a more strategic approach, what would expose his misdeeds beyond any doubt and bring his carefully constructed facade crumbling down around him. And I knew just the person who could help me orchestrate my revenge. After my conversation with Olivia, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for justice. Hudson's betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined, and the thought of him carrying on his deceitful ways filled me with a rage I had never known before. I needed a plan, a way to gather irrefutable evidence of his misdeeds and expose him for the fraud he truly was. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally, someone who could help me navigate the treacherous waters ahead. That's when I reached out to my brother, Grant. We had always been close, and I knew I could trust him implicitly. When I explained the situation, his reaction was one of shock and fury. "That son of a bitch," Grant growled, his fists clenched. "How dare he do this to you, Karis? You don't deserve any of this." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. "I know, but I need your help to make things right. I can't let him get away with this." Grant's expression hardened, his eyes burning with determination. "Whatever you need, sis. I'm with you every step of the way." Over the next few weeks, Grant and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence of Hudson's duplicity. Olivia provided us with insider information, helping us piece together the puzzle of his deceit. We uncovered incriminating emails, financial records, and even photographic evidence of Hudson's affair with Janine. The more we dug, the clearer it became that his promotion was built on a foundation of lies and underhanded tactics. "Look at this," Grant exclaimed one night, thrusting a stack of documents in my face. "He falsified expense reports, embezzled funds from the company. This guy is a criminal, Karis." I felt sick to my stomach as I pored over the damning evidence, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. Finally, I had the ammunition I needed to bring Hudson's world crashing down around him. As the days passed, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger and hurt warred with a lingering sense of love for the man I had once vowed to cherish. But his actions had shattered that bond, and I knew there was no turning back. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Grant asked one evening, his voice laced with concern. "This is going to get ugly, Karis? Are you prepared for the fallout?" I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. He made his choices, Grant, and now it's time for him to face the consequences. The plan was set in motion, and there was no turning back. Hudson had sown the seeds of his own destruction, and I was determined to reap the bitter harvest. A part of me still held out hope that he might come clean, that he might show some semblance of remorse and save what little was left of our fractured relationship. But deep down, I knew better. As I waited for the perfect moment to strike, to unleash the storm of retribution upon my unsuspecting husband, I couldn't help but wonder if a part of me had been irrevocably changed. The betrayal had left scars, hardening my heart and fueling a thirst for vengeance that terrified me. But there was no going back now. Hudson had made his choices, and it was time for him to face the consequences, no matter how ugly or painful they might be. With Grant's unwavering support and Olivia's insider knowledge, our mission to gather evidence against Hudson intensified. We were like detectives on a case, leaving no stone unturned in our quest to expose his web of lies. Grant had connections in the tech industry, and he leveraged them to gain access to confidential records and communications. Late nights were spent poring over financial statements, email threads, and surveillance footage, piecing together the intricate puzzle of Hudson's deception. "Look at this," Grant said one evening, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. "He's been siphoning funds from the company into offshore accounts for months." I felt a sickening twist in my gut as the realization sank in. Not only had Hudson betrayed our marriage vows, but he had also compromised his integrity and broken the law in pursuit of his ambitions. "That bastard," I muttered through gritted teeth. "He's going to pay for this, Grant. I swear it." Grant's expression hardened, his jaw set in determination. "We'll make sure of it, sis. He won't get away with this." As the days passed, the evidence mounted, painting a damning portrait of Hudson's misdeeds. Illicit affairs, financial fraud, insider trading. It seemed there was no line he wasn't willing to cross in his pursuit of power and success. And yet, despite the overwhelming proof of his wrongdoing, a part of me still held out a glimmer of hope that perhaps, deep down, there was some justification for his actions, some explanation that could somehow make sense of the chaos he had unleashed upon our lives. But every time I entertained that notion, the memories of his lies and betrayal came flooding back, extinguishing any lingering sympathy I might have harbored. "He's a monster, Karis," Grant said one night, his voice thick with disgust. "A a selfish, lying monster who doesn't deserve a shred of your compassion. I knew he was right, but still, a part of me struggled with the weight of the decision that lay ahead. To expose Hudson's misdeeds would be to set in motion a series of events that could very well destroy him, professionally, financially, and perhaps even legally. Was I prepared to go that far? To unleash a storm of retribution that could potentially consume not only him, but also those caught in its wake? As I wrestled with these questions, Grant's voice cut through my thoughts. "Carys, look at me." I met his gaze, drawn in by the intensity in his eyes. "You didn't ask for any of this," he continued. "Hudson made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences. Don't let your compassion blind you to the reality of what he's done." His words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a truth I had been grappling with for too long. Hudson had brought this upon himself, and it was time for me to stop making excuses for his inexcusable actions. With renewed determination, I nodded, steeling my resolve. "You're right, Grant. It's time to end this, once and for all." The planning continued, each piece of evidence meticulously catalogued and organized, building an ironclad case against the man I'd once loved. As the final pieces fell into place, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet satisfaction. Hudson had chosen his path, and now it was time for me to choose mine, a path that would lead to the reckoning he so richly deserved. With the weight of Hudson's betrayal bearing down on me, I knew the time had come to confront him directly. I had to give him one last chance to come clean, to acknowledge the depth of his deceit, and perhaps salvage what little remained of our shattered relationship. Grant was adamant that I should proceed with caution, fearing Hudson's potential for volatility when backed into a corner. But I was resolute in my decision. I needed to look into his eyes and see if there was even a flicker of remorse, a glimmer of the man I had once loved. I arranged for us to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground where we could have a candid discussion away from prying eyes. As I sat waiting, my heart pounded in my chest, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within me. When Hudson finally arrived, his expression was one of confusion and mild annoyance. "What's this all about, Carys?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. "Hudson, we need to talk about what's been going on." He tensed, his body language defensive. "What do you mean?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder filled with the damning evidence we had gathered, emails, financial records, even photographs. "I know about the affairs, Hudson. I know about the fraud and the embezzlement." His eyes widened as he took in the stack of incriminating documents before him. For a moment he seemed caught off guard, but then his expression hardened and a cruel smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth. "So, you've been doing a little digging, have you?" he sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. "Bravo, Carys. Bravo." I felt my blood boil at his dismissive attitude, but I forced myself to remain calm. "This is your chance to come clean, Hudson, to tell the truth, and maybe, just maybe, salvage what's left of our marriage." He let out a harsh laugh, his eyes cold and utterly devoid of remorse. "Come clean? Why the hell would I do that? I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let a little thing like you ruin everything I've built." His words cut like a knife, laying bare the depths of his selfishness and depravity. In that moment, I realized that the man I had loved was gone, consumed by his own twisted ambition and greed. "You're a monster," I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "A lying, cheating monster who doesn't deserve a shred of loyalty or love." Hudson leaned back in his seat, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Call me what you want, Carys, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who's going to come out on top. You think your little stunt here is going to stop me? Think again." As he rose to leave, he fixed me with a cold, calculating stare. "You had your chance to play nice, but you blew it. Now you're going to find out just how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." With those chilling words, he turned and strode out of the cafe, leaving me shaken to my core. In that moment, I knew that any lingering hope of reconciliation was gone, replaced by a burning desire to see Hudson pay for his crimes. The gloves were off and the battle lines had been drawn. Hudson had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. A choice that would either see me emerge victorious or be consumed by the fires of his wrath. As I sat there, clutching the damning evidence in my trembling hands, I realized that there was no turning back. The path ahead would be fraught with pain and retribution, but it was a journey I was prepared to undertake, no matter the cost. Hudson's downfall was inevitable, and I would be the one to orchestrate his demise, even if it meant sacrificing a part of my own soul in the process. After Hudson's defiant reaction and veiled threats, I knew there was no turning back. The time for diplomacy had passed, and the only path forward was to bring his misdeeds into the harsh light of day, exposing his carefully cultivated facade for the world to see. Grant and I meticulously planned our next move, scrutinizing every detail and anticipating every potential obstacle. We couldn't afford any missteps. This was our one chance to strike a decisive blow and ensure Hudson's downfall. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a major company event, a lavish gala attended by executives, investors, and industry bigwigs. It was the perfect stage for our grand unveiling, and we were determined to make it a spectacle Hudson would never forget. As the evening unfolded, I watched him work the room, charming and schmoozing his way through the crowd with practiced ease. It made my stomach churn to see him so effortlessly maintain his charade, all while the weight of his deceit threatened to crush him. When the time came for the speeches and presentations, I caught Grant's eye from across the room. He gave me a subtle nod, and I knew it was now or never. With my heart pounding in my chest, I made my way to the podium, clutching the folder containing the damning evidence against Hudson. The room fell silent as I took the stage, all eyes fixed upon me. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm sure many of you are wondering why I've interrupted this gala, but I assure you it's for a matter of grave importance." Hudson's face had drained of color, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fear. I fixed him with a steely gaze, determined to hold his attention as I methodically laid out the details of his misdeeds. "For years, my husband Hudson has been engaged in a pattern of deceit and corruption," I declared, pulling out the first piece of evidence, a printout of an incriminating email exchange. "He has been carrying on multiple affairs, including one with his direct report, Janine." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as I continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Financial fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. No stone was left unturned as I methodically dismantled Hudson's carefully constructed facade. Throughout it all, Hudson remained frozen in place, his face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief. When I finally fell silent, the room was engulfed in a deafening silence, punctuated only by the occasional gasp or whispered exclamation. Then Hudson found his voice. "You lying bitch," he snarled, his composure crumbling. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin everything I've built? You're delusional." But his protestations fell on deaf ears as I produced the final piece of evidence, a damning video recording that captured his misdeeds in vivid detail. As the footage played out on the massive screens flanking the stage, Hudson's face drained of color, and he sank back into his chair, utterly defeated. In that moment, I knew I had won. Hudson's carefully constructed empire had come crashing down around him, his lies and betrayals laid bare for all to see. As security escorted him from the premises, his eyes met mine one final time, and I saw a flicker of something I hadn't expected: regret. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, the fallout was swift and severe. Hudson was promptly fired, and legal proceedings were soon underway, threatening to strip him of everything he had so ruthlessly acquired. As for me, I felt a strange sense of catharsis, tempered by a lingering sadness for the man I had once loved. But ultimately, I knew I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but for all those he had wronged in his relentless pursuit of power and success. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe a little easier, secure in the knowledge that justice had been served. In the aftermath of Hudson's public downfall, the wheels of justice continued to turn with relentless momentum. With the evidence I had painstakingly gathered, the authorities wasted no time in building a case against him, leaving him little choice but to face the consequences of his actions. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I found myself embroiled in another battle, the battle for our shared assets and the life we had built together. Hudson, desperate to salvage what little he could, fought tooth and nail to maintain control, but I was determined not to let him walk away unscathed. "He's going to try and bury you in paperwork and legal jargon," Grant warned me one afternoon as we strategized our next move. "But we've got the upper hand here, Carys. Don't let him intimidate you." With Grant's guidance and the support of a formidable legal team, I navigated the treacherous waters of the divorce proceedings, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontations with Hudson. True to form, he resorted to every dirty trick in the book, attempting to gaslight and manipulate me at every turn. "Carys, please," he pleaded during one particularly heated exchange. "You know I never meant to hurt you. It was all just a misunderstanding. We can work through this." I fixed him with a withering glare, utterly unmoved by his hollow words. "Save your breath, Hudson. The only thing I want from you is a fair settlement. Nothing more, nothing less." His facade crumbled, and the true depths of his rage and bitterness were laid bare. "You think you've won, don't you?" he snarled, his eyes burning with hatred. "Well, you're wrong. I'll make sure you pay for this, one way or another." But his threats rang hollow, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. With the weight of evidence stacked against him, Hudson had no choice but to accept the terms of the divorce, which stripped him of a significant portion of his ill-gotten wealth. As the final papers were signed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Hudson had been brought to his knees, his once towering ambitions reduced to rubble by his own hubris and deceit. In the weeks and months that followed, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life, surrounding myself with the unwavering support of Grant, Olivia, and those who had stood by me through the darkest of times. Hudson, on the other hand, found himself adrift, his professional and personal life in tatters. Whispers of his misdeeds spread like wildfire, making him a pariah in the very circles he had once coveted. On occasion he would reach out, his messages dripping with desperation and remorse. "Carys, please, you have to forgive me," he begged in one email. "I was a fool, and I've lost everything that matters. Give me one more chance, I'm begging you." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The wounds he had inflicted ran too deep, and the man I had once loved was little more than a distant memory, eclipsed by the monster he had become. As I forged ahead, building a new life on my own terms, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal, the pain, the burning desire for vengeance. It had all been a crucible, forging me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And while the scars of Hudson's deception would never fully heal, I took solace in the knowledge that I had emerged victorious, my integrity and self-worth intact. As for Hudson, he would forever be a cautionary tale, a reminder of the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the consequences that awaited those who dared to cross the lines of loyalty and trust. In the end, the sweet taste of retribution was tempered by a lingering bitterness, but I knew that I had done what was necessary to reclaim my life and my dignity, and for that I had no regrets. With divorce finalized and Hudson's machinations laid bare, I found myself at a crossroads. The life I had once known was gone, replaced by the harsh realities of his betrayal and the aftermath of my quest for vengeance. But even in the midst of the turmoil, a part of me refused to be defined by Hudson's actions. I was determined to forge a new path, one that would allow me to not only heal, but also to help others who found themselves in similar situations. That's when the opportunity to work with a local nonprofit organization focused on empowering women presented itself. It was a chance to take my own experiences and channel them into something positive, a way to ensure that no one would have to endure the pain and heartbreak I had faced alone. "This is perfect for you, Carys," Grant enthused when I shared the news. "You've been through hell, but now you can use that to help others find their strength." With his unwavering support and the encouragement of my close friends, I dove headfirst into the work, pouring my heart and soul into advocating for those who had been wronged, betrayed, and cast aside. It wasn't easy, of course. There were days when the memories of Hudson's deceit would come flooding back, threatening to overwhelm me with a tidal wave of anger and sadness. But each time I felt myself slipping, I found strength in the stories of the women I worked with, their resilience, their determination to rise above the ashes of their own shattered dreams. Through it all, I couldn't help but wonder about Hudson's own journey. Where had his fall from grace taken him? Was he still clinging to the delusions of grandeur that had fueled his downward spiral, or had the weight of his actions finally broken through his arrogance? The answers came in sporadic bursts, whispers, and rumors that filtered through the grapevine. He had been forced to downsize, selling off his lavish possessions and moving into a modest apartment. Job prospects were scarce, his reputation forever tarnished by the scandal he had brought upon himself. A part of me felt a twinge of pity for the man I had once loved, but that fleeting emotion was quickly eclipsed by a sense of justice. Hudson was finally reaping the consequences he had sown, a bitter harvest of his own making. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that I had emerged from the darkness stronger, more resilient, and with a renewed sense of purpose. The scars of Hudson's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had become a part of my narrative, a testament to the trials I had endured and overcome. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism and hope. The road ahead would undoubtedly be paved with challenges, but I knew that I had the strength and the support system to navigate them, one step at a time. In the end, Hudson's legacy would be one of cautionary tale, a reminder of the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the consequences that awaited those who dared to cross the lines of loyalty and trust. But my story, I hoped, would be one of resilience, of rising from the ashes of betrayal and forging a new path, one that would inspire and empower others to find their own strength in the face of adversity. And as I looked back on the journey that had brought me to this point, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just for the justice I had served, but for the person I had become in the process. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead with a newfound sense of purpose and resolve.